Welcome to our Rolemaster Actual play session. Twilight of the Old Order is a campaign set in the world of Duyranaki, the continent of men. In this gritty, cutthroat world, politics, religion, and commerce are all intertwined and reign supreme. Characters need to be both smart and ruthless to survive. We hope you enjoy our story, and, as always, may the dice roll in your favor.
This is the Epilogue of Twilight of the Old Order. We hear from the players about what happens immediately after our last played episode, what their characters' daydreams are for their own future, and the GM answers questions from the players and audience about the campaign. We pick up the story as the Twilight Party are victorious. But what will happen to them next? Hello, I'm Chris, otherwise known as GM Chance. And this is a bittersweet sweet moment. As the words say on screen, welcome to the end of our story. Twilight of the Old Order is a campaign that started 6 years ago. We finished our last session some couple of months back. Today is our epilogue session. Today, we bid farewell to Twilight of the Old Order. These are the characters that were in play on our very final session. But much more importantly, a lot of what today is about, these are the players of those characters in all their glory up on screen now. There they go. Give them a round of applause. I'm not going to wax too lyrical here, but before we talk about endings, outcomes, or what happens next, I want to take a moment and acknowledge the people on the screen in front of me. This campaign began 6 years ago as a bit of an experiment. A return to Rolemaster, to a harsher style of play, and to a brutal world that wasn't interested in protecting you from your own decisions. None of us knew how long it would last, and yet here we all are. First, I would like to acknowledge Graham. Graham, you've been part of this game from the very beginning. Session 1, Day 1. You've carried that commitment all the way through, across multiple characters, through deaths, near deaths, long pauses, long arcs. You have been a constant presence in this world. Your investment, memory, willingness to engage deeply with the setting has helped anchor Twilight, particularly as it was both finding its feet and then onward. So, Graham, sincere thanks to you. I also want to particularly thank Pete, who joined not long after, about a year in, I guess, and very quickly became one of the pillars of the campaign. Pete, your note-taking, your episode summaries, your rules lawyering didn't just keep the game honest, they kept it coherent. So much of what this campaign became was strengthened by the fact that someone at the table, or on the screen, was paying close attention and holding all of us, especially me, to account. And to everyone here, past and present, thank you. Thank you for showing up session after session. Thank you for trusting me with your characters in a system that is very famously unforgiving. Thank you for leaning into consequences instead of trying to escape them, and for allowing your characters to change, sometimes in ways that you didn't expect or even particularly like. Hopefully for you all, Twilight of the Old Order became more than just a game. It became a shared history. A story shaped not by heroics alone, but by caution, fear, faith, stubbornness, cruelty, mercy, and loss. You didn't just win fights, you survived in a world that pushed back hard every time you tried to shape it. Some characters walked away, some fell, some endured long enough to see what their choices truly cost. Through it all, you treated the world seriously enough that it could take you seriously in return. Thank you for Severin's resolve, Tanya's edge, Jadar's faith, Nicholas's darkness, Askel's unpredictability, Yotto's steel, and Gray's choice to leave when leaving mattered. Today isn't about trying to neatly tie everything up or hand out perfect endings. It's about looking back, understanding what these characters became, and deciding how their actions echo forward in the world of Duyranaki. So sincerely, as your referee, as your storyteller, as your GM, thank you for the trust, the patience, the commitment, and the story that we built together. Welcome to the epilogue of Twilight of the Old Order. So as we discussed at our last session, we're going to break today into different chunks. The first, and I have been hugely excited about this, is I get to hear a story from you guys. I get to hear a collective tale of what happened next. So the brief I gave to you was, tell me a tale of what happens after we finished at our last session. We finished here, as a matter of fact, at our last session. Tell me what takes place. So I'm really keen to hear what the next stage in the story is. And this is not meant to be months in advance. It's meant to be a few weeks or a bit further down the line. I'd suggested then we go to daydreams about what each character kind of had an idea of what they were going to do in their future. I think we might swap that round. We will do that. But I'd like to tick off the questions that you guys asked me first, just in case others need to leave. Well, I'll give you, we'll do that first. We'll do the questions first, and then we'll jump into the daydreams. And then we will have some other questions that you may have come up for me, which I'll either attempt to answer or dodge or whatever, depending on how much I can remember. And then we may have some questions from the audience as well. So we've hopefully got a few people joining us today, and they may have some questions too. And then that's it. So, with no further ado, the GM gets to pick up his Fight Like a Princess coffee mug with Princess Leia on it, sip his coffee, sit back, and enjoy the story being told to him. Just before I do you want me to change some sound effects? Would you like some wind in the background to set the ambience and the theme appropriately? Or are you happy with what's playing? Your call. Anybody?
Well, that's quite nice. What's playing? That's fine.
Okay, great, cool. I am all ears. I can't wait. Yeah. Let me hear the story.
So yeah, you're going to hear a sort of multiple chapter story, each of us taking turn to read a character. Giles is going to be reading Severin. I'll be reading Tanya, and unsurprisingly, Pete's going to be reading Nicholas. Anthony's going to be reading Askel, and Star's going to be reading Jadar. And so, unfortunately, I haven't got a part for Aiden, unfortunately. But yeah, you can cheer from the sideline.
There we go. Cool. Yeah, the floor's yours. Take it away.
Would you like to kick us off then?
Yeah, part one, beating a retreat.
It's a great picture of Severin. So Severin stared down at a gruesome scene, still leaning on the sword with which he'd pinned Papillus's head to the floor. Ooh. He stood mute, breathing heavily. He examined the curious look of surprise frozen in the dead man's eyes, the spill of blood radiating across the tiles, and the angle of his blade rammed neatly up and under the fanatic's jaw. Rather artful, he thought. Strictly speaking, it hadn't been necessary. His previous slash had already ended it. But as the light began to fade in Papillus's eyes, Severin felt the need for one last defining blow. a gesture to mark the close of this strange chapter of his life. He'd also felt the need to explain, perhaps as much to himself as Papillus, as to why. He wrenched his blade free and sheathed it. Backing away, he bathed in the light of one of the chamber's tall windows. Sighing, he felt a weight drop from his shoulders. He closed his eyes to recall his little speech. The lives lost. His mother? Alive? He hoped against hope she had found a way through the dust. He glimpsed her for a moment, ahead of her army, proud, defiant, before the shots rang out, and the scene dissolved in an airy swirl of, well, whatever this foul invention of Papillus's was.
Tenya hissed. Snap out of it. She was already tugging at Papillus's armor. Loosening the speckled gold breastplate, she drew out a leather satchel slung around his neck. Rising, she produced a small red disc. Here! She held the disc up to the light, and then, pausing to look first at Jada, then to Askell, to Nicholas, and finally at Severin, she brought it down hard on the blood-soaked floor. They'd not discussed destroying the secret of the devil dust, but having witnessed the slaughter out there on the plain, there was no dissent. Tenya picked up the shattered pieces, snapped the larger in half, and passed them out to each of the party. Scatter them wide, let no one have the chance to repiece it.
Please, can you tell me when the image changes, by the way? I'm loving these.
Every new voice.
Every new voice. Cool.
Giles.
Unmute Giles.
Thank you. Still thinking of his mother, Severin had sunk to sit on the window's broad sill, but the smashed disc brought him back to their predicament. He stood sharply and went to leave, but then the sheen of Papillus's armor caught his eyes. In the shifting light of the chamber, its surface seemed to shimmer, an effect he recognized from the same curious gold speckling that encountered in the Lords of Arcana vault in an exposed seam of rock. Mind rock. Something he should investigate further, he thought, and crouched to strip away the dead man's metal plates. He removed the man's jewellery, calling Askell to search the other bodies. Anything of interest went into his pack, anything that might buy him another few months on the road. He paused at Papillus's weaponry, then, wiping a reeking black sludge from both the sabre and dagger, tossed them in too. Perhaps a year on the road.
Nicholas, rummaging in his pack close by, drew out a second matching red disc. Tanya, put this in the satchel. It's an alchemy spell, useless to us, but it may fool his followers for a while. Then, to the others, the soldiers' uniforms? They may prove useful, though we best hurry. I suspect we don't have that much time.
Jada, disinclined to peel clothes from corpses, jogged back across the narrow stone crossing, trying not to glance at the dizzying drop on either side. In her mind, she replayed Yotto's final, desperate moments not 2 minutes earlier. She whispered a short prayer. Though she had not known the man really, in the short time they'd been together, he had shown himself to be stout of heart and undoubtedly as determined as they to rid the world of the TPP. Without his bravery, would they have come out of their final showdown so remarkably unscathed? They would not. He was a good man, and she would not forget him. In the far cave, Jada fell upon the cases and casks she'd examined earlier and went about stashing away as much of the water and food rations she could, urging Hara, Micah, Yono, and Umli, who followed in behind her, to do similarly. When would they next be anywhere where a meal could be bought? Some weeks away, she guessed, and filled her pack to the brim. Moments later, the rest of the party emerged at pace. At a bark from Severin, they ran on for the rope bridge, retracing their steps at speed, up along the rocky passage and out into daylight. And then, to a sudden halt. There was a commotion ahead. From the other side of the long, spindly bridge, a band of men, dear God, 30, 40, were sprinting, full bore, for the crossing.
A bit of a problem with that image. Hidden among the fallen soldiers that littered the cave entrance, Yonton lay flat on his belly, not 10 yards away. Ahead of the others, Tenya was notching an arrow when a small flash caught her eye. She turned, spotted Yonton, then dumbly followed with her head as a small trail of flame as it traced its swift and purposeful line to the bridge. Urgently, she dropped to the crouch and turned her face away, and with a whoosh, the oil-soaked frame and boards of the bridge's near side erupted, sending a wall of flame roaring skyward. Caught at its near end, two of the armed men somehow stumbled out across, scorched but unharmed. But behind, 5 were engulfed, their screams filling the cave. A cry from Yonton then, "Sever the bindings!" And the party started into action. Severin and Askell stepped forward to meet the 2 advancing soldiers, as Hara and Umli ducked and struck at the bridge's ropes. Yonton had been busy. They were only held by threads, and after a few quick swipes they gave. The bridge dropped, and the burning men fell, and 5 more with them, following their comrades' screams into the cleft below.
Blades flashed, and the 2 soldiers fell, but Nicholas took scant interest. Instead, he made his way calmly from body to body, rifling through the robes of what he knew to be the fallen TPP Polit Committee, snatching anything he perceived to be of value. But Yonton's shout pulled him on as the party turned on their heels, and seconds later they were sprinting back down the rock passage. Nicholas lagged behind. From across the smoking divide he had heard similar calls from their foe. Clearly their paths would meet soon enough. As he caught up with Yonton, who, puffing and cursing, still clutched at a reddening wound, Nicholas considered his options for the upcoming encounter. His move to summon a giant bird of prey had proved decisive in foiling Papillus's last stand, but now he was low on mental reserves. He decided it was best to hold back, best to see which way the battle went with the brutes ahead. There were no guarantees. The party was seriously outnumbered, and he hoped he wouldn't be needed. Nothing deflated him more than having to fall back on swordscraft. It was so messy, physical, and crude. Nevertheless, he drew his blade. Needs must.
The party rounded a corner to discover the passage opened up once again to daylight, framing what appeared to be a second cave entrance to the complex. Like the last, it was littered with bodies. Askell heard the tumult of the approaching men before his eyes could properly adjust. What were odds this time? It would be, 3-1 at least? In any other circumstances, this would be a confrontation to avoid. But where to go? He considered summoning a shield, but remembered that their last encounter. No speed was at an essence. And yes, every blade would count. He mouthed the words ruefully, then sighed as, right on cue, Severin snapped his usual order to line up. Did he not know that Askell was injured? Nevertheless, he fell in at the swordsman's right shoulder, and was pleased as Hara stepped in close to his. Micah was next, while on Severin's left, Yono, Umli, and Tanya braced for battle. There was a moment of concern. Askell noted that the passage was a margin wider than their line. Could the soldiers get around behind? Perhaps they should retreat. But then he caught a glimpse of Jada, paused just behind on their right flank, and turning, saw Yonton stepping forward to seal their left. This was it then. The soldiers barely slowed as they fell upon them. Askell tensed, picked his man, and braced for impact. There was a crash of arms as the TPP soldiers smashed against their makepeace wall, throwing them back a pace, but, thank the gods, he turned away a longsword, aimed squarely for his chest. The wielder, dressed in black with a committee's red insignia emblazoned across his chest, had been over-eager, and now, yes, overextended. With his free hand, Askell violently shoved the soldier back, and in the opening yaw brought his cutlass up to bear. His opponent struggled to parry, but found no room to maneuver, and Askell found his mark, a patch of bare flesh under the soldier's raised arm, and drove his point home. There was a scream, the man fell, then was on to the next.
On to Jada. Are you there, Star?
Can you not hear me?
Oh, they can hear you now.
The scene was a whirl of limbs and blades, and it was clear to Jada that the party's line of 8 would not be enough. Soldiers spilled to their flanks. She clenched her teeth. There was a gap she must fill, that this was no place for a woman of healing. So she quickly packed that side of her away to fall back on other skills. Skills she would not care to discuss. Indeed, if you'd asked her, Jada would have been shocked, affronted even, to be labelled a warrior. She might even have pulled her hijab across her face at the shame of it, but in truth, she was better in melee than she thought herself, considerably better. She let out a short scream to focus herself. Ahead of her, Micah desperately thrashed to keep 2 soldiers at bay. He'd taken a wound to the arm and was vainly attempting to parry both. The nearest opponent had no helmet. A mistake. Stepping forward, she made a series of jerky and abrupt maneuvers, rotating around her staff as if in dance. She darted right, then unexpectedly swung left, and in the same motion drew back her staff to drop to a half crouch. Then, with barely a pause, she lunged violently, snapping her arms forward to drive the point of her staff directly into the soldier's exposed temple. Then it was on to the next.
Tanya itched for a bowstring, the focused cool of picking a target and mechanically raining it with steel-tipped arrows, until whatever it was stopped moving. It suited her better. There were too many of them here, and they were all too close. But so far, so good. She was holding her own, agility making up for the lack of shield as she dodged, weaved, and feinted one attack, and then struck out with the next. Her sword hummed, eager for blood, and she let it feed. The sword of slaying, so Nicholas poetically put it, but accurate nonetheless, very accurate. Where she swung too wide, she felt its gentle correction, and where it hit its target, it seemed to revel in opening up flesh. She knew if it were to drop, it would return to its mistress without pause. Perhaps she could get used to this. Perhaps she would need to. To her left, Yonton with a groan fell to the floor. He'd fought bravely, but pain had blighted his reactions. He swung wildly, and his opponent, young, fresh for the fight, was just too quick. Tanya couldn't pause to tell, but she doubted Yonton would rise from the blow. This was a problem. 2 soldiers advanced on her simultaneously. She blocked one and tried to dodge the other, but a blade cut into her left arm. Tanya was surprised to hear her own cry. It sounded desperate. She could only imagine that it was. But then, a new ally stepped in.
What was Nicholas doing? This was no place for a man of science, but here he was, a gifted academic amongst the blood and brutality of battle, where a single misjudgment meant a painful death. Such an unsafe environment. He would do everything he could to hold them off, and let the more suited to this finish them, while he did his best just to parry. There was something deep inside of him that told him he would not die in combat. At least, not here. Not today.
There were a lot of men crowding in on Severin now. 3, 4 rows, more than he had time to count, and many more than he'd bargained for. But, thank the gods, yes, Askell and Yono were still on their feet, so yes, he could afford to take each new soldier as he came. But on and on they came. He moved with a methodical rhythm, each swing a new breath, paced, deliberate. 1 strike for each. It would be enough. These are foot soldiers, he told himself, rank and file. Keep your focus, keep calm, and they will fall like stems of corn before the reaper's blade. His mother's words. Mother, if you could see me now.
The fight had become desperate. Askell was exhausted, bleeding and in considerable pain. The party's line had been steadily retreating, buckling at its flanks so that he and Haras, Severin and Yono occupied a bulge, effectively fighting back to back as the enemy began to encircle. He roared, fighting with all his might to prevent them dropping further, praying Micah and Jada would find new strengths to hold their ground. But then he noticed, gaps in their foes' ranks. Daylight. They were thinning. He summoned more strength, roared his mother's name. Where did that come from? Put his full weight to a determined downward slash. His blade bit hard into a mailed warrior's exposed neck, and to Askell's relief, he fell. The pain flooded his senses. But this time, no new figure appeared to take the dead man's place. Just daylight. Beautiful daylight. He was aware of Severin dispatching another to his left. Still none came. Caring not that he exposed his back to the cave mouth, he spun to his right and lurched forward, breaking the line. 2 soldiers were bearing down on an all but beaten Micah. And there, just behind, with one hand supporting herself against the cave wall, the other limply extending her staff to block another axe blow, Jada. He caught a glimpse of the healer's fear. She looked done, spent, prepared for the end. Jada. And then Askell lost all hold on himself. Raw anger rose up and he pushed the pain away. In a fiery rage he didn't recognise, he screamed and brought his full weight to bear on the shoulders' exposed backs. He slashed, he stabbed, again, blood spraying across his face. He fell into an all-consuming frenzy. The soldiers were down now, but it wasn't enough. He roared, he hacked. Nothing less than mincemeat would satiate him. Bodies prone in the dust, entirely inert, failed to acknowledge the onslaught. But Askell still rained down blows in ragged exhaustion, over and over, till at last a familiar, coming voice sang out, Askell, you can stop, please. And then he collapsed.
For a moment, she thought they were done. She and Nicholas, shoulder to shoulder, edging even further back into the cave. Tanya felt weak. Her full energies now went into self-preservation. She concentrated on tracking the wide arcs of her foe's swings, anticipating their aim, and each time she brought her sword up to block, but for how much longer? And then, Severin, looming into view behind the 2 remaining men. She was aware of the soldier on Nicholas falling first, his skull cleaved at the swordsman's first descending swing, and then saw the realization on her combatant's face that, yes, my friend, you are now all alone. The soldier nevertheless did well to disengage, and ducking Severin, stumbling and rolling over bodies, he picked up at a fair pace as he ran. But Tanya would not permit it. She turned. Miraculously, her bow was still there behind her, closer than she thought, propped neatly against the wall. She snatched it up and picked her way forward, drawing an arrow from her back. The last Torang soldier was nearly at the top of the rock-cut stairs when the arrow struck him. He probably thought he'd make it. Certainly he didn't feel it. Tanya was happy with the shot. It landed a little higher than she'd wanted, but considering her exhausted condition, was that any surprise? She stood there a while, motionless, holding up her bow in front of her with one eye clamped shut, replaying the sequence. A neck shot. Go her.
Nicholas had never seen so many bodies, or so much blood. Some of it was his own. He pressed his hand to his forearm as he surveyed the scene. A squat wall of Torang dead ringed the cave entrance. Among them, Yonton, clearly dead. Umli, dead. Yono on his feet. Hara on one knee, injured. Askell, dead? No, Nicholas saw him stir. Jada, leaning over him, she bleeding from an open gash at her shoulder. Micah, leaning heavily against the opposite wall. Severin, standing just outside, keeping watch for more soldiers, now greeting Tanya, limping into view. With a hastily wrapped bandage on his arm, Nicholas helped pick up and patch up the rest as best he could. All wore hollow, exhausted expressions. Jada had set to work on Askell, but Severin called out urgently they had to move. They couldn't survive another encounter. With Yono's help, Severin hoisted Askell onto his shoulder, wobbling under the weight, and then, all of them somewhat unsteadily, they gave one final glance at the dead and stumbled out across the rocky platform. Nicholas heard a shout as they neared the rock-cut stairs. He looked back and saw figures on top of the outcrop behind, one pointing, beckoning, the other winding a crossbow. But, to his relief, he saw that the wooden stack of stairs up to the outcrop was smoking, their tops still aflame. Yonton? It had to be. His forethought might just buy them time.
Severin urged the sorry group on. Most were unable to keep pace, either clutching wounds or just plain exhausted. He was far from steady himself. Yono helped and took Askell's legs on the stairs, and now they slung the warrior between their shoulders. Stray crossbow bolts clinked on the rocks around them as they recrossed the plateau. But as they reached the top of the ledge, above the roughly hewn slope, that they judged themselves sufficiently out of range. Tanya didn't need prompting. She reslung both her and Severin's ropes around the same rock she'd used previously, and took the strain to guide the group down the face, one by one, save Yono and Severin, who half slid the distance together, roughly dragging Askell, whom he let out on a second rope. Then she untied both and threw the ropes down. She wouldn't leave easy access for those who would follow. Her climb down was imprecise and painful, her leg not in a good way, but she managed not to fall. Then on they staggered. Tenya assumed they would backtrack into the main valley, but after a few hundred yards, Yono led them sharply left, scrambling down into a tight crevice. It looked an improbable route, but at its base, it revealed a small dark opening to the right, entirely hidden. Ducking through, they found themselves in a wide, silent cave. Pausing to light a torch, Yono and Hara explored the back wall. Tenya had time to sip from a flask before Hara grunted that he found the way. It was low, and they each took their turn to crawl, dragging their packs and then, with extreme difficulty, Askell through the 10-foot squeeze. They were all exhausted now, panting and wincing, as they picked their way through a confusing twist of passages that were clearly once part of a watercourse, until at last, daylight. Only a thin patch of sky could be seen above. They found themselves in a narrow gully with sheer walls. They followed it for about 100 feet before Yono once again diverted them, this time up a steeply angled side chamber. The climb, though technical, was tough and long, and several rocks proved loose. Severin slipped halfway up, sliding back amid much swearing and clanking that echoed alarmingly off the gully walls. Hara glared at him to be silent and then urged them on. At last they pulled themselves up onto level ground. Their position, yards from an abrupt drop, offered a panorama of the wide valley below that Tenya recognized as the direction of their approach 2 days before. As they paused, she drew out a piece of Pipalus's disc. Turning it over in her hand, she dropped into a nearby fissure, then scanned the open valley for movement. Nothing. But Yono was keen to keep them moving and took the lead again as they tracked up and across what she guessed to be one of the tops of the 500 feet massives that she had studied from the valley below. 20 minutes later, weaving between a maze of craggy outcrops and scrambling down a narrow gorge, they diverted into a sheltered nook. At the far end, she saw yet another cave entrance. Turning, Yono threw down his pack. Camp. Part 2, Aftershocks.
There was little rest for Jada in the hours that followed. Draining her of her last charge of mental energy, she tended as best she could on a still unconscious Askell. Satisfied that he was at least stable, she moved on to the rest, methodically cleaning and dressing wounds, nodding silently at their heartfelt words of thanks. Finally, when she had done all she could, and with Askell sufficiently wrapped against the worst of the approaching night, she found an otherwise unoccupied corner of the cave, laid out her bed mat, and slept like the dead. Several of her companions spoke of the howling wind overnight, but her sleep had been long, deep, and remarkably untroubled. Now, sufficiently replenished in spirit and more crucially mind, she rose and immediately resumed her rituals. For a full hour she worked on Askell. His pulse was weak, but, God be praised, he would live. Sealing his wounds with whispered incantations, she set about the more challenging task of drawing him back to consciousness. Closing her eyes, Jada steadied her breathing and let her mind reach out. It took several minutes to establish a connection, but after a few gentle prompts and a couple of wrong turns, she found her way in. A slow breath escaped her as, softly, her mind stole in alongside Askell's, and from there she let her influence be known, slowly spreading her presence across his body, wrapping the warrior as if cradling a child. The sensation was one of two essences entwined. It was a deeply intimate process, coaxing a body back toward life, one she preferred not to dwell on, and it took time and patience, but there was something not quite right. There was something she'd never felt before. Without doubt, Askell's body was responding, but as Jada went about her work, she felt oddly as if she were being observed, that somewhere just beyond her reach there was, yes, another. She sensed it trying to conceal itself, but Jada had the distinct awareness of a door where there should be no door, and beyond, a listener. For a second she saw the flash of a woman's face, piercing eyes, beautiful, but at the same time menacing, then replaced by a man, familiar, warm, safe. Then he was gone. Askell's eyelids fluttered open. With Severin's help, Jada managed to get him to sip water. They dared not light a fire, so they wrapped him in furs and propped him near the cave mouth, where he spent the rest of the day, weak and in silence, watching with an empty gaze as the snowflakes whirled in the breeze.
minute.
Askell let his mind drift. He felt hollowed out and troubled. His whole body ached, his head spun, and while Jada's work had sealed the worst of his wounds, they still stung from the violence. But there was more. That look in Jada's eyes when he'd come round. By the gods, she knew. Didn't know how, but he had a strong sense that Jada had discovered what no one should know. The voice. His mistress. What pained him most was that if Jada knew, then likely the mistress would know. Dina Abdulaziz Al-Fawdi knew everything. Askell recalled the experience which had burrowed deep into his mind. Under her gaze, he was entirely transparent. A body and mind laid out for inspection. His fears, his motivation, his crimes, the monthly ritual, his conscience, such as it was, and yes, his desires. It was something he lacked the words to describe, but his own feelings had been confirmed, and had changed everything. Jada was at risk. His Jada. He'd borne terrible secrets since becoming one of the Seekers, done unspeakable, unforgivable acts to further his mistress's financial, political, and dark interests. But if there was ever going to be a road back, a way to be free, it was now. Jada would be his motivation. He didn't know whether she would bear to look at him again, but there was a chance, a sliver of hope she could forgive. After all, of anyone, surely she knew what it was to shelter another. And when she needed someone, he'd been there. Literally, he'd wrestled her demon and won. Perhaps it was too much to hope for. Would Jada do the same? While his mind whirled, he dug a hole in the gravel at his feet. Taking out his broken pieces of Papala's secret, he carefully placed it in and then covered the hole.
Tanya picked her path with care. While she was still a good 50 feet from the nearest campfire, and after all invisible, putting a foot wrong in the presence of several thousand enemy soldiers could have serious consequences. But she was good at this, remaining low and, despite the wind, balanced. She stalked tentatively, but surely, placing each new step with due caution. A gentle touch of the heel to the ground, and then a light roll onto the toes. Repeat. Yet it was snowing hard now. If a soldier looked up, would they catch sight of a tenure-shaped absence of snowflakes in this whirling storm? Unlikely. There was no moon tonight, and if our high elf was having difficulty picking out the particulars of those bundled around brightly lit fires, the chances are lesser men would be clueless to an intruder stalking out here in the darkness of the plain. She hoped. For all her efforts, Tenya was leaving tracks, but they crossed a confusing pattern of footprints by blundering infantry, which from her observations earlier in the day appeared to be suffering from the now recent loss of leadership. Even now she saw a fistfight break out close to the gates of the citadel. It attracted quite a crowd of onlookers, who, starved of anything better to do, formed a ring and began shouting and jeering the combatants on. Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Minutes later, she ducked in behind a broad pillar of rock that protruded rudely from the citadel gate. There were 4 guards, but none looked to be in the mood for sentry duty. Stamping their feet, they grouped in the lee of a giant door pulled ajar to afford some level of shelter from the night's incessant wind. Several hundred feet above, she could just about make out the shape of an all-too-familiar stone bridge. Testament to the scale of the conflict that had unfolded above, there were a good number of bodies, but he wasn't hard to find. She approached with due reverence, crouched, and lay her hand on Lyoto's head. Gently wiping the snow from his face, she chose to whisper a few words in her own tongue. There seemed little chance of giving the man the send-off he deserved in such proximity, but she wanted to at least pay her respects. And, well, he wouldn't be needing his things now. He'd have done it the same, she told herself, and it's true, he would. She secreted the slain man's shock ring, a second that she knew enabled his left hand to work with the dexterity of his right, and finally removed a finely carved dagger that he wore on his side. Tenya paused there a while, her hand in his, the wind howling through the gap. Before leaving, she leant forward, kissed him lightly on the cheek, and put her mouth to his ear. Know this, my friend. You made the difference. The past is dead. Be at peace. You will be remembered, Yotto. Suddenly remembering then that she'd never asked his family name.
Severin's smile was fixed. Despite the cold, he felt a slight trickle of sweat on his brow. Collecting himself, he threw the Turan captain a cheap quip about the stench of foreign flesh. 3 days on from the slaughter, the smell was already evident. His Thebronic was actually rather good, but his activated earbuds made it considerably better. They gave his accent an angular, more rasping tone, and somewhere between his brain and his tongue inserted a colloquialism he didn't think he knew. To his relief, the soldier grunted his approval at Severin's wry smile. Nothing's sweeter than rotting elf flesh on the morning breeze, comrade. Pleasantries exchanged, Severin pushed further. And the joyful butchers? Did we get 'em all? There was a silver-haired woman ahead of them, so I hear, begging for a dusting, eh? The captain spat. Yeah, I saw her, their leader, so it said, but no sign of her among the dead. Some of the Thracians got away. Maybe she went crying to them. Maybe her body was blown into tiny pieces. Most of the butchers were butchered. We built the mound. Turns out they burn well, even in this frigid place. Severin smiled, pushing away the urge to separate the man's head from his body. Behind the captain, 3 infantrymen listlessly stared across the plain, half listening to the exchange. Behind Severin, Yono and Hra looked on, judging when best to smile or scowl, and not understanding a word of the conversation. To his right, Nicholas, who was following the conversation, listened intently. All 4 were dressed in TPP uniforms, all bearing their red insignia, and the ruse seemed to be working, which it was as well. They might be able to run for a side valley before the alarm was raised, but Severin didn't want to bet his life on it. He felt exposed. They were out in the open broad daylight, though actually not far from the rocky route to their cave. They'd circled in a wide arc to disguise their approach from across the plain, having judged the sentry's point sufficiently isolated. Their followers will pay for what all they've done, Severin offered. We will avenge the dear leader, the bastards. The man appeared to recite his response. The torch has been lit, and once the fire is put to dust, the devils will burn at our feet. Torvish Papellus be praised, Severin replied, praying it was appropriate. He'd heard the phrase months before. But who takes up the calling now? Who will show us the way? Your guess is as good as mine. Torvish Anusta? Grenlithan? Breeden? There will be blood, I'm sure of it. But in the meantime, we mate. Wait, where did you fight, comrade? Oh, on the far flank. I regret we were late to the party, returning from a patrol when we heard the horns. But we made up for the lost time, Thracian scum. Who's your commander, then? Severin blinked. As of now, I have none. Martyred in the first charge, but I'm taking orders from Torvash Breeden's men, which reminds me, we should be on. My company is low on power. Bears own the valley? Is there a better place to stock up on dust? The captain looked at him curiously. Better place? Where better than the powder hole? None that I know of, Severin nodded to the man. For the revolution, comrade, and turned to leave. He was seriously out of his depth, and it was beginning to show. The captain voiced his reply, but wearing a frown, continued to study them as the 4 figures walked away. He turned to his men. Breeden's lot. Didn't need to ask. Pig fuckers from the north, all of them.
From its name, Nicholas had expected yet another anonymous cave opening, but the powder hole turned out to be a little more than that. It had taken Tanya a full day to find it, but now she and Nicholas stood hand in hand, invisible on the rim of a crater he estimated to be some 300 feet across. Relatively shallow, at its centre there loomed a hulking square structure with a large wheel and some type of cable system protruding from its roof. He surmised it to be a mechanism for lowering or raising people, or presumably dust, from below. Something he'd seen the like of years before in the copper mines of Maniwald. 100 or so feet to their right, a ramp had been cut out of the caldera wall, winding its way circuitously to the crater floor. Clearly, it had been engineered to allow carts to haul out their loads at a reasonable incline. More pertinently, it was guarded by 8 men at its top and, as far as Nicholas could see, at least double that patrolling in and around its end point, where it disappeared into the structure through 2 large double doors. "So what now?" Tanya whispered. Walking over and knocking seemed a poor option. "I think we need to dispense with gravity." "Gravity?" "Never mind."
Tanya knew nothing of gravity, but Nicholas had assured her that, given now they were entirely free of it, it need not worry her. Instead, she focused on holding their horizontal position against the wind. Checking their progress as they passed the top of the wheel of the engine structure, she guided their vertical descent. An empty horse-pulled cart that they tracked on its final approach was now directly below and paused at the doors of the structure. She could hear an exchange of words as they neared and the sound of a bar being drawn aside. Time to move. She tapped her thumb twice on Nicholas's hand and, gripping him tightly, rotated her body in a smooth movement, guiding Nicholas with her other hand, and put them both into a controlled dive, head first and down. Sure enough, the doors began to swing open. Not waiting for the cart, she aimed them for the widening gap, and in a few heartbeats they slipped in, under and into darkness. Allowing her eyes to adjust, she paused, and then gently let them rise to take in the surroundings. The space inside appeared to occupy the entire interior of the building. High above them, she could make out a complex system of wheels and cables, while below she noted a wide, circular platform in the direct center of the room that swayed within the bounds of a hole in the bare rock. 30 feet across the suspended platform, it had clearly been constructed to enable it to pass through the hole to whatever lay beneath. Around its circumference there ran a stout railing, from which a number of taut, thick ropes were secured that disappeared up into the rafters. An even thicker cable, meanwhile, likewise dropping ceiling to floor, had been threaded through a second, smaller opening at the far end of the structure. Tanya counted 4 soldiers around the edges of the room, several of them now pulling at its wide planks to bridge the narrow gap between the boards and the platform. The horses were urged forward and clopped onto the swaying platform, pulling their load into place, before being promptly hooded. Closing a bar behind the cart and securing its wheels, a series of shouts followed, and with a loud clanking above and a small shudder, the platform began to drop slowly away. Floating some 30 feet above, Tanya and Nicholas followed it down.
The chamber beneath was vast. Judging by the arrangement of strange glowing stones that eerily lit the circumference of its interior, the cavern into which they dropped was at least as wide as the crater above and some 200 feet to its floor. Nicholas was cognizant of a number of passageways that radiated out, seemingly in all directions, at the cavern's edges, but their attention had been taken by a single, wider tunnel to the south, and more specifically to what marked its passage from the platform, now coming down to rest on the cavern floor. Lit by 2 lines of glowing standing stones, so as to give the impression of a procession way, several hundred barrels were arranged, 5 high and sturdy scaffolds, over which hung a series of ropes and pulleys. The barrels were orderly stacked to resemble casks of wine, but on a scale Nicholas had never conceived. Tanya, of course, had been keen to explore more of the complex, but as they crouched behind one line of barrels, Nicholas considered their means of retreat should they be discovered. The cavern was crawling with men, though few appeared armed. But, with he and Tanya's feet now back on solid ground, they were out of time when it came to flight. The platform was operated from below, as he suspected, by a way of clever counterweight, which rose and fell on the thicker cable in opposition to the platform. There might be another exit, but any chance of escaping would seem to hinge on him recasting flight twice. And with the effects of the lonely tale, or was it the pieces of the gold-speckled rock, he was not at all confident. Magic was weak. It had already taken him 4 attempts to see both of them airborne in the first place. Yet their success would undoubtedly lean on Nicholas's ability to pull something out of the air. Once again, Tanya whispered tersely, "So, what then?" Nicholas took a few minutes to answer, tapping his forefinger on Tanya's clutched hand. While he thought, he slipped out a piece of Papillus's disc. Holding it in his palm for one final inspection, he twisted his hand and let it fall to the floor. No, he had seen enough. If luck was with them, there was no need to creep further into Papillus's factory. You were right to smash the disc, Tanya. Your instinct was correct. The world is not ready for dust. I say we finish what you started. Let us spread some of Papillus's discovery around down here, shall we? And then we'll use our new friend, gravity.
Tenya, on the whole, trusted Nicholas. But this was a wild plan, even by his standards. She counted the points at which it could unravel. Too many to consider, she thought, and instead concentrated on the task at hand. Carefully pouring out the remainder of their oil, the last of 6 casks, across the assembled barrels, the platform on which they crouched was now 50 feet clear of the floor of the cavern, and rising. Would the oil be dripping below? Undoubtedly. But the men that had secured the cart had immediately turned their backs on the rising cargo. The task of unloading and securing the platform was clearly one they had undertaken hundreds of times, and given it was already unsteady with the efforts of drawing the horse and its cargo, it had been quite simple to roll under the rail undetected. What lay ahead, however, would not be. Tenya stared at the faint outline of the hole in the cavern's ceiling above. Nicholas whispered his position, and she took hers. Together they waited. 4 soldiers. 12 if the door was opened. Not ideal. It seemed to take an age, but when at last the platform drew level at its starting point in the structure above ground, Tenya went into action. Leaping up from her position, she shot the first soldier at the door, clean to his chest. Then whirling, she whipped a second arrow in the same movement and released it at the man tending the ropes. Already wide-eyed at her sudden appearance out of the ether, he dropped. But with a shout, 2 remaining men closed in. Dropping back under the rail, she let go of her bow, drew her own sword, and then a second sword, held in her left hand the Boriotto's ring. She backed up against the structure wall. They came at her together, one from each side. She knew, though, to ignore the soldier to her right and concentrated on parrying the thicker-set man as he bore down on her with a longsword. Nicholas didn't let her down. Abruptly, he blinked into being, his sword protruding from the second soldier's side, but neither blow proved conclusive, and the sound of melee rang out. There were shouts of alarm now from outside, and a hammering on the doors. The horses, still on their platform, began to panic and kick out at their load. She felt her sword of slaying in her right hand vibrate in anticipation of blood, but again chose to block the next attack. Then, with some measure of her opponent, she pushed off the back wall and rammed her shoulder into his chest with her full weight, that for a second they were cheek to cheek. There they wrestled, long enough for her to catch a stench of stale breath. He was stronger, but as the distance narrowed, he lacked space to bring up his blade. Tenya did not. She drove her short sword deep into his stomach. The blade writhed in her hand, and without her willing it, gnawed and sawed upwards into his guts to feed. Tenya fell with the soldier then, his full weight landing on her, pinning her to the floor. She lost her grip on her first sword, and a second clattered away across the boards. A breath went from her. Desperately, she struggled to free herself from the dying man's weight. 10 feet away, Nicholas was backing away, his adversary raining down blows on him. Finally, rolling the man off her, she managed to get to her feet. Closing her eyes, she lunged. It was an act of faith, but in the time it took for her to blink her eyes open from the summons and thrust her arm forward, the sword of slaying had yanked itself free from the fallen soldier's belly and slapped neatly back into her right palm. In the same moment, she struck the soldier, hard below his right shoulder blade, but he whirled immediately in response. Catching her off guard, his shield smashed her clean in the face, and once again she went down. Her head swam as she fought for consciousness. Disoriented, she pushed herself up with one arm and steadied herself with the other, just in time to see Nicholas, now pinned against the wall, push himself off, using his weight to bear down on the man so that they both, too, fell to the floor. They rolled on the boards. Tenya struggled to stand, the soldier too, but Nicholas was quicker. Rising, he whipped out his dagger from his belt, slammed his knees down on the man's sword arm. The soldier brought his shield up arm to throw him clear, but Nicholas caught it, and with his dagger, opened up the soldier's throat in a final, exhausted slash.
Both crouched, breathing hard as blows hammered on the doors. The horses were frantic now, and the cart was smashing against the rails. Nicholas picked himself up. Dropping his dagger, he leaned heavily against the structure wall to focus on the broad counterweight cable, 20 feet to his right. He shut his eyes and began to breathe deeply, fighting to calm himself. This could not be rushed. This would need his full mental strength. Blocking out the noise and his aching body, tentatively he let his mind reach out to gauge the distance. Feet planted wide, slowly he began the chant inside his head. Extending his left arm to the direction of the rope, he drew his right back to his ear, and there stood poised, swaying gently as if a serpent preparing to strike. Tanya, be ready. And she was. He lifted his eyelids. Still focusing on the cable, from the corner of his eye, he caught sight of flame. Loudly, he recited the TPP's own words aloud as if they were part of the ritual. The torch has been lit, and once fire is put to dust, the devils will burn at our feet. 3. Fully prepared, he began the final sequence, picturing the runes as he spoke them. The air seemed to quiver. 2. A moment of doubt then, but Nicholas pushed it away. When he called for it, the magic would come. Comet or no comet, it would be there. 1. And it was. The connection tripped. Nicholas inhaled deeply as he took on its power and prepared for the release. He was aware of the motion of Tanya's torch and the flame catching, the sharp whinny from the horses, and on his cheek, the sudden heat. Then, miming the action with his fingers, he drew open the void and, in front of him, a 10-foot section of the counterweight cable, taut and unyielding, ceased to be. And so the platform, the horses, the cart, and 4 barrels of devil dust, all awash with fire, fell away from sight.
While Nicholas had some notion that a large explosion would follow, what eventuated was rather larger than he'd bargained for. Despite watching in awe at the devastating effect of the devil dust on the battlefield days earlier, he'd not had the means to estimate the full destructive power that 200+ barrels of the substance, suddenly igniting in a confined space, would trigger. What in fact eventuated would not be equalled across the 4 continents of the known world until the eruption of Mount Katastahan some 275 years later. The shockwave alone vaporized the entire complex below and above ground. A pulse of pressure exploded outwards with such awesome force that nothing but the gods themselves could have conceived of it. Ironically, on show, that day was a power truly greater than that of magic. What would Papillus have? Papillus had witnessed it. Perhaps it would have made his trials worthwhile. Irrespective, channeled by the narrow shafts, the blast wave obliterated everything within its reach without exception. The structure around which Nicholas and Tanya cowered, clinging to each other until the last, was immediately detonated, and everything and everyone within its immediate vicinity was torn into 1,000 pieces. Those pieces in turn were subjected to a thermal pulse that incinerated everything that had been left with any meaningful form. A plume of flame burst above ground, reaching some 300 feet into the air. A few milliseconds later, violent hot gases surged out in its wake, tailed seconds later by a vast, billowing cloud of dust and smoke that cloaked the frigid landscape for a mile in every direction. Of the cavern itself, while it had withstood several ancient secondary eruptions in the millennia since its creation, the structure could not withstand this level of violence. Caving in on itself, it collapsed, its central vent enlarging to a gaping 150-foot diameter, gouged hole of heat and smoke. That explosion took Severin, Askell and Jada by surprise, and it was an understatement. Drawn up with their own horse-drawn cart half a mile away, once again dressed in TPP uniforms, they were expecting to hear news of Nicholas and Tanya's scouting expedition. They had not banked on them taking decisive action before reporting back. And certainly not this. Dear God, not this. All 3 were thrown to the ground by the impact. Scrambling, they took shelter under the cart as rocks and debris rained down on the landscape around them. With horror, they looked at the vast plume of flame and smoke filling the horizon.
The rain of rock subsided, Jada rolled out from under the cart. A large cloud of dust enveloped her. She smarted as a wall of heat and grit accompanied it. Logically, no, nothing, and certainly no one could possibly have survived that level of violence. But the road she'd taken with Tanya and Nicholas had been too long, and the bonds she shared were too deep for her to turn back on them now. So as Severin and Askell emerged, coughing and spluttering, she took the horses by their bridles as they shook and reared in abject panic and whispered soothing ancient words until abruptly they fell into unnatural calm. Then she began to swing the cart around, determined to make for the centre of the explosion. But a voice from one of two huddled shadows in the back of the cart cut her short. "Can we go home now?" Tanya.
It was a spell he barely knew, well above his proficiency and learning if truth be told. But in the heat of the moment, the words came to him. Even if he had been sitting at peace, thousands of miles and an ocean of troubles away, back in his hometown, with his feet up in front of the hearth, listening to the hypnotic hum of the evening cicadas, even then, he could not seriously have hoped to cast such a spell with any success. Most likely he would have spent the next day in mute shock at the foolhardy attempt of harnessing it. It wouldn't be the first time. But to hope for any measure of success out there, staring down annihilation under the weight of the tail, impossible. Much less casting it in a split second with no preparation, no gesticulation, utterly preposterous. But he had, all the same. Was it determination? Was it desperation? He and Tanya, clutching each other in terror in those final seconds, had their predicament focused something within him. In the years that followed, Nicholas could only put his success down to one thing, for which he had absolutely no evidence: the gods. Well, why not? One trifling intervention for the preservation of the old order, small acknowledgement from Apollo, god of knowledge, for saving the world, wasn't much to ask for. Had he asked? The teleport came off in any case. His first audacious attempt at moving more than one target, and his first at such a distance. He contemplated his decision. To teleport himself would have been rational, but when it came to it, he had not hesitated in taking them both. Curious, and something for Nicholas to ruminate on.
The final curtain.
Askell had not known a cold like it. He lacked the words. For the previous 2 weeks, he'd been in permanent discomfort, frozen to the bone in this godless, wind-blown wasteland. But all this paled into insignificance now as they crossed the lip of a high-altitude pass on their third day and met the biting wind head-on. It had been decided the best route back to civilization, or frankly to anywhere to put some distance between them and the TPP's rapidly disintegrating army, was a week-long journey through, up and over the mountains that Yonton's men had taken to get within striking distance of Papalis. It was not a decision they had taken lightly. Hurrah, Micah, and Yono's account of their approach, the crossing of two passes with little cover and little in the way of food and water, made for grim listening. Even they agreed that it was better to make for a known navigator column than chance weeks in the wilderness searching for where there should be one. They had expected bears, and they met two on the second day. They lost Yono, then Micah. Hurrah marched on, but disconsolate now, and always lagging back. Frequently they had to stop to urge him on, to keep him walking, to keep him living. It had been 3 weeks since Yonton's men had made the crossing in the opposite direction, and with midwinter now drawing near, conditions had worsened. Struggling down the pass, they were knee-high in snow. Every so often, one of the group would take a step and slip into a drift, sometimes above head height, and the party would need to stop, fall back, and dig them out. The situation had become dangerous. They were wet, frozen, and exhausted. But to pause here would mean death, of that they were certain. Through the swirl of snow, far below, they could see the dark outline of what appeared to be forest. The promise of some measure of cover kept them on, but Askell wasn't certain he had it in him. As he stumbled on, he felt himself numbing, and curiously, as they crested a patch of a bare ridge, he began to warm. A mile from the tree line, Askell slunk down and would not go on. Raised in a hot, arid climate, without an ounce of fat on him, he simply wasn't designed for these conditions. He'd done three times earlier that day, and this again cast a warming on Askell, but still they couldn't raise him. Carrying him was out of the question, so Nicholas summoned up a dwindling mental reserves and flew Askell and himself the remaining distance desperately pulling him against an unrelenting wind. They made slow progress but crashed under the first line of pines with only seconds of flight to spare. Dragging him under the cover of spruces, Nicholas spent his last reserves on an earth wall to put against the wind and set about trying to make a fire. Everything was wet. It was impossible. As the rest of the party stumbled in 40 minutes later, they all set digging with all their might, hollowing out a serviceable snow cave to set them against the night. Miraculously, Tanya managed to light several spruces torn from the slopes, setting them to flame with Yotto's shock ring. For a time they had fire. By its light, Jada chose to bury her piece of Papalis' disc in the snow. But the reserves soon burned low, and they settled in for the most miserable night of their lives.
5 days later, they sighted the Arcana ruin at the end of a broad valley. The party was ragged, but they would live. In the last few days, the lower altitude afforded more shelter, and the landscape offered up a familiar honeycomb of caves. It was too much to hope for that the wind would ease, but the snow subsided, and they made better progress on bare rock. Between them, Nicholas and Jada had somehow kept Askell moving, taking turns to cast whatever they could to ease the burden. And, with relief, when they asked of it, the magic came. Had the comet passed, or was it that the gold-flecked rocks no longer scattered the ground? There was no way to confirm it, but there was no denying the weight was lifting. As they approached, they could see that precious little remained of the Arcana complex. Its enclosing wall had been reduced to a few feet of crumbled stone. Inside the compound, only one discernible structure remained. 3 wind-scarred walls and a cluster of pillar stumps marked out a building that had once sheltered the navigator column. But now the stone stood exposed, proud and resolute against the elements, and in marked contrast to everything around it, entirely untouched. Severin paused at its foot, pulled off his gloves, and traced a palm across its ancient markings. He looked around at his companions, hollow, hungry, exhausted, and then took one last look back down the valley at the bleak mountainscape beyond. Turning his back on 18 months of adventure, struggle, and pain, he spoke the words, "I need a navigator."
Which brings us to now. It is early evening in the Grand Bazaar Lodge. The Twilight party sit together, wordlessly, content. Their bellies are full. Colour has returned to their faces. Each wears new, fine clothing, purchased that morning in the fine boutiques of Jebe Rotana. Tanya, Nicholas, and even Jada cradle a cup of the establishment's finest wine. Severin and Askell each nurse a frothy house ale. They had intended to lie to the Monman, fearful that notoriety would bring unwelcome attention, but the Monman already knew it all. Who it was that had beheaded the committee, what became of Yotto, Yonton, and his men, and who it was that had blown Papilis' terrible secret into 1,000 unrecoverable pieces. How they knew, Severin could not begin to imagine, but for what it was worth, they had been assured their anonymity, and, as of yesterday, they were, as the hooded men had put it, dismissed of service. To seal the deal, they and Hurrah, who would soon take his leave, were each dispensed with jewels. Initially it felt dirty, they felt used, but having now been clothed, fed and accommodated in a manner to which they were not accustomed to, the sour taste had begun to sweeten. And on their person, each holds gems worth just shy of 5,000 gold pieces. The fire crackles. Severin takes in his companions one by one. Our next image. Jada catches his eye, and beneath her hijab smiles shyly. Tanya curls her lip at him in mock disgust and swirls her wine in its glass. Next image. Nicholas stares at the flame in contemplation. And Askell? Despite everything, Askell looks uneasy. Severin recalls the beginning 18 months ago. Casting off in a tall ship, he and Jada, with Balazar and Elias, of a shipwreck that bound them to Tanya and then to Eddie, of a conspiracy which drew them to Bitterroot, to Grey, and then to Nicholas, and onto the scent of a hunt that would send them across to the very ends of the earth and beyond, with the hero party, with Basilis, with Askell, with Yotto. Severin has had little time for fate, much less for the gods, but looking back, it was clear to him now their coming together could be no accident. Not if the hero party's tale of gods and goddesses on the road to Jebai, Macbeth was to be believed. And all had paid their part. Next image. He may take some pride in being the one to finally strike Papillus down, but if not for Jada's healing's hands over the last 18 months, Severin would have suffered a multitude of drawn-out, excruciating deaths, bled out in far-flung deserts, jungles, and dusty tombs. Next image. Without Tanya, her keen eyes, her bow, her pointed corrections, his endeavours would have come to nothing, he knew it. Next image. The crazed barbarian Eddie had taken blows meant for Severin, and his bravery surely had eclipsed his own. Next image. Faithful Grey, wherever he is now, Severin's rock and battle for so long. He'd felled as many foes as he, and somewhere out there now, the story is still being written. Next image. Nicholas appeared when they needed him most. A much-needed tactician, a mind worthy of the puzzles that lay ahead, and a way with arcane knowledge that had, how many times, made the difference between success and bloody failure. And then the next two images. Even
Nice.
Balazar and Elias too. Only now does he recognize the truth. Without their fiendish example, would he have had the courage to walk the other way? Without the clash of their world view, stark against Jada's goodness, how else would have he known, in his heart, what was right, and ultimately what was worth saving? Next image. Askell, of course, for his sword-work and companionship, but sent to them, he thinks, to be Jada's saviour, so she could continue the thankless task of saving the rest. Next image. And in the final act, Yotto had been their sacrifice. He'd taken them over the last hurdle and paid for it with his life. Rest in peace, friend. Next image. For a second then, Severin considers the possibility of an unseen hand in some far-off land in another dimension, deciding their fate on the roll of a dice. But he shakes himself from the reverie. From his pocket he takes out the last, smashed piece of Papillus's disc. Holding it up to the light, he takes one last look at its strange characters, and then, with a flick of his wrist, tosses it onto the fire. Without turning his head from the flame, he speaks. The twilight of the old order has passed, friends. Together, or apart, we are free. To go as we will, to do as we wish. But, and here, with a smile, he sits up, locks his hand and looks at them. I have a proposition.
The end.
Hooray! Oh, thank you. Bravo. I'm gonna switch views so we can see you in all your glory, guys. Here we go. That was wonderful. Thank you. That was utterly superb. After 6 years of telling this tale or setting the scene, how amazing to have all of you tell me a tale in return. I love that. Thank you. That was great. the images are amazing, and the narrative is superb. So thank you, one and all. Round of applause from your GM. I really enjoyed that. That was superb. And I mean, just from particularly touching the scene of Tanya and Yotto, the nice crossover between Vostrod, Jadar's demon, and Dina, I thought was just great. There was so much in there, and Nicholas with his last minute spell, that was just superb. So really, guys, thank you. That was really special, and I'm so pleased we got a recording of it. That's huge. Thank you. Goodness, I'm almost lost for words. I will say, however, we have now two of our listeners joining us. We have Marcus. Marcus, sincere welcome to you, and also Matt. I hope you enjoyed that tale as much as I did. Please drop us a line or say hi in the chat if you feel so inclined. So look, yeah, I'm almost needing a quiet lie down and a cup of tea after that. In terms of what next, I'll give you guys the choice. Here we go. We've got a couple of options, two options, and have a vote for me. Stick up your thumb. Option 1 is we go to the GM answering your questions. Option 2 is we go around each of the characters doing their daydreams of what they want next. So thumbs up for option 1, questions. Thumbs up. Okay, there you go. I think that's the winner. So let's go back to the heroes of the game. There we go. Go back to perhaps. We'll keep on that for a bit. So look, what I've done is I have so to refresh your memories and also our audience's memories. A couple of months ago, I asked each of you to send through 3 questions, which I am honor bound to answer, which I have duly done so. And I've put together a document. It's 23 pages long. I'm not going to be reading all 23 pages, but I will post them to the chat, and you can have a look. But I will bring that up in a minute. And we'll go through each question, but I'll definitely share that. Go. We'll put it on that screen. So, we're starting. What's a good screen to? Yeah, we'll keep on that. Unless anybody has a crashing desire, otherwise, let me know if not. Anthony, first question. In the in-between, I recall we had 3 possible locations to go to. We chose the dungeon place. What can you tell us about the other places? By the way, the questions that came through were phenomenal, and a lot of them caused me a lot of frantic scrabbling through my notes and all the rest of it. So I'll read out some of the lengthy answers, and I'll mix and match with what I've got. So you were presented with 3 viable exits from the in-between. You chose the Vault of the Righteous Wing, an undead-infested holy forge holding lodestones, blessed weapons, and vast treasure, but extreme risk. The second option, to answer your question, was the Chambers of the One from Beyond, a deeply dangerous alien sorcerer who traded in souls, enslavement, and forbidden knowledge. Previous trade had succeeded only through desperation and wards, and returning would have almost certainly have ended in death or worse. The third option was the Crypt of the Fallen Queen, a lair of Dasur the Eternal, ancient, cunning fire drake, with a vast hoard and many servants. So the GM's idea behind it was all 3 paths offered solutions, but each carried, understandably, escalating danger and long-term consequences. Next question. This is question 2 from Anthony. Vostra, I presumed, was a demon. This was the demon that infested Jada. Just get this up. So I do have some images on my own to share. Bostrod, I presume, was a demon of some sort, perhaps human once. Can you provide an origin backstory for Bostrod? Bostrod was not a demon. I'll try it again. Bostrod was not a demon, nor once human. It was called a ragged Indolon, a being from a liminal cosmic fracture that feeds on fate, significance, and identity rather than flesh. It entered this world, Duyranaki, during the Mage War Cataclysm and was nearly destroyed by the old gods. It survived by binding itself to a death cult, a Thamazulian death cult artifact, and later to Jadar, feeding on emotional fractures and feeding on destiny. When it resisted, it panicked, not from pain but starvation. Its terror came from losing access to her fate. And in the document I'll send through, there's a very lengthy description of actually what would have happened to Jadar had Bostrod not been removed. Have a read. The third question from Anthony was, screen here, change view. What weaknesses did the half-human, half-spider, acid-spitting creature in the cave have? You guys all hear me still okay? Yep, cool. So, the answer to your question, Anthony, is just quite simply, the creature was actually fully human, and therefore vulnerable to all things that a human would be vulnerable to. Its abilities came from both the Foul Changes list and the Corrosion Mastery, not from some innate monstrosity. So it actually was it was human, and you could have slain it. So here we go. If you remember, these weird spider legs sprouted out of this critter. I actually found an image, unfortunately, a bit later after that segment had gone, that was kind of in my head of what it looked like. It's kind of that. If that kind of had any... Yep, seeing some smiles, yep. But it was human, and it just simply cast some absolutely monstrous spells. The first one was this, Foul Changes. You might be able to see on screen, and don't worry, in the question and answer doc, there's a copy of this. But there's a spell down there called Spider Legs. It causes 8 long spider-like legs to grow quickly from the caster's side. The legs can be up to 20 foot long, raising the caster up in the air. And there's also another spell where the creature, or the person, the caster, can turn upside down, which is exactly what this foe did to you. So, no monstrosity, just someone with some really, really, really horrible spells that look pretty much like that, using that spell, and then the Corrosion Mastery list, and you'll see the one highlighted there, Acid Ball. A ball of acid is shot from the caster's palm, attack is resolved on the fireball attack table, delivering an acid criticals. So, to answer your question, yeah, you could have, the right moment at the right time, and by the way, one of Giles's questions dives into this a bit later. With some luck, with some luck, you could have perhaps defeated it, and perhaps won the day. But yeah, totally human. Graham, first question. What happened immediately before Twilight discovered Papillus? That is to say, what were the events that triggered the battle? How did the armies get there? Who were they? How did they know? And what was the result? So let's go to a slightly more detailed answer for this one. So this event was something that Papillus had been planning for many, many, many years. He had discovered an inferior recipe of devil dust in his youth, and had laboured to try to find a better and more powerful recipe to display on day 0. He had been plotting for some time, many years, to seize power in Turong by murdering the Pollock Committee on day 0, and then display the power of his new and terrible weapon. And the display of power of this new and terrible weapon was needed not for the feeble-minded, out-of-touch Pollock Committee, but rather for the senior commanders and the rank and file of Turan troops. His own men, those of the Committee for the New Age, had seen Devil Dust experimented with before, but Papillus needed a colossal show of force to show the army that he was going to lead that he was a man for the job. So, for the last 3 years, he had been collecting prisoners from battles and skirmishes with TPP armies and shipping them down to Krakoa. Elves, Thamazul troops, soldiers from Thrace and mercenaries. Typically these troops were from locations such as colonies of the Great Power in the south and close to Turan's borders. The last shipment, that of about 500 or so troops of the Joyful Butchers, only arrived some 10 days ago. In total, over the course of 3 years, Papillus had managed to amass a captured army of around about 15,000 men. These captured, miserable soldiers were fed and given some degree of fuel for fires and furs to keep warm in the bitter cold, but at least 30% of these soldiers died either on the way to Krakoa or perished in the bleak, cold, massive underground caverns that existed on the plain of Krakoa. The prisoners had been constantly fed the line that, quote, at the right time they would be given their weapons back, and if they were victorious, they could win their freedom. Thus, having absolutely nothing to lose, they filed up the massive ramps out of these caverns in the chill air and to their doom on day 0. Because in fact, they were merely demonstration tools as part of Papillus's bid to seize ultimate power, and with an army armed with gunpowder behind him. If you go back and listen, there were some very subtle hints about the upcoming murder of the Pollock Committee that Papillus was planning by way on his final speech from the tower. I'll send out a document with all of the appendices so you can have a read. Great question, and I knew it was going to come from Graham or from somebody. What triggered our sudden transportation into the in-between? So there were 2 things, guys. Two aspects. The in-game reason is that the hero party, the other party that were your companions and your friends throughout a number of your adventures, the hero party had been touched by the divine far way back in the north at the very beginning of their adventures. Now, probably people in the Twilight team didn't know this, but the hero party had figured this out. They'd been marked by 2 kinds of divine or gods. One lot was called the Fate-led. So these were gods that actually felt that the good had kind of gone out of the world, and their time actually might have come to an end, and that Mirdas, the Defiler, who was in the hero game, might triumph, and that an end to the old corrupt world, including themselves, might not be such a bad thing. So they were gods that actually said, yep, feck up, we're done, can't be bothered, let's go. And then there were the other gods who wished to maintain the status quo, who wished to maintain the old order, even though their divine power was failing. So at that moment in Manta, at that moment in the Holy Union of Asatris, as the Knights Hospitaller were searching for the hero party because of the assassination, the acclaimed assassination of the Oracle of Pytha, were closing in. So if you remember, these knights were closing in on both parties. The Fate-led, so the ones, the gods that were going whatever, chose that precise moment to try to claim the heroes party and to take them out, basically, to slay them. And as it happened, any other beings in the area were kind of pulled into that orbit. So if you recall, tendrils of the black, which came from the flames, which came from the fiery place, and the white, the terrible light above, spewed out of the hero party's mouths. You may recall that. It was a long time ago since we played, but spewed out of their mouths. And all beings, including the hero party, but of course the Twilight party that happened to be around, and basically the Twilight party were effectively collateral damage. These Fate-led tried to pull them either up into the terrible light or down into the flames. Now, had that happened, the hero party and you guys would have been pulled in either direction. However, at that second as well, the other gods, the ones that actually wanted to protect the old order, realized what was going on and basically acted as a counterpoint and grappled for control. And the pull for the hero party and those around you guys, you were pulled into it. The end result was that neither side of the divine won that grappling attempt, that attempt to pull you up. And instead of being pulled either into the terrible light above or the flames below, you found yourselves, including the hero party, being pulled into the terrible purple fog of the fifth place. Now, depending on how each character rolled, you guys and the hero party, it had an element of how strong each character was either pulled up or down. And you may recall some of those rolls. That's what that was about. So that was the in-game, the meta region. Your other companions had been touched by the gods, good gods and bad gods, and the good gods and bad gods tried to kind of hit against each other and ultimately cancel each other out. And instead of going up or down, you ended in the in-between. That was the in-game reason, so that was the narrative reason. The meta reason, the story reason, was as follows. It was October 2022. I needed somewhere interesting to put the combined parties for an upcoming in-person session. And those people that attended were most of you on the screen. Anthony, Pete, Graham, Alex, Mason, Stara, and Aiden. The Twilight party had just come back from the Holy Unit of Asatris, and they had just met with Tanya's godmother Ningwen on the Isle of Darn. The hero party were on the run, as mentioned before, from the Holy Union of Asatris. So they were potentially religious assassins, could be one view, and they were being chased. And so we had this one group running from the law, another group arriving back in town. So where the story landed us in terms of getting together in person prevented me with a few problems. With Hero being on the run from a pretty competent organization, the Duyranaki Church, how could we manufacture a vaguely realistic story that the hero party actually would have been able to escape? There's a very fair chance that they would have got caught. That was problem number one. Problem number two was the two parties had only just met. So how could realistically, and we're talking about a game about gods and demons here, but how realistically would Twilight have trusted a group of potentially religious assassins? I kind of felt that from a narrative point of view it seemed kind of silly. So I needed some way of getting the hero party out of Asatris, some way of the two parties being thrown together in the face of a new direct threat to them both, and somewhere interesting and kind of dungeon-like to explore for our upcoming in-person session. I'd recently been doing some reading on planes of existence and their use in role-playing games, and suddenly the in-between seemed to solve a bunch of my narrative problems at once. And then created a whole bunch more problems, i.e. the length of time it was taking to finish the in-between. But that was the rationale. So the in-game rationale, and then the holy shit, these guys are coming together and going to be playing in person, and I have nowhere interesting to put them that kind of makes sense from the story. So, whoosh, boom, gone, bang, into the in-between.
Very good.
Yep. Next question. Was it possible, this is question number 3 from Graham, was it possible to kill the big windy thing in the Lords of Arcana complex? If so, how? So the thing itself, and all of this, by the way, is here, you can read at your leisure. The thing itself was called a resonant echo. And ultimately, the answer is yes, you could have killed it, but it only took damage from elemental magic. Shock bolts, fire bolts, ice bolts, etc., which you don't have much of. And it had 200 hit points. So your tactic, which you chose doing, of outrunning it was the best. So I gave it one clear disadvantage, which was it was slow. And once you guys realized it was slow, you outran it, and that's exactly what could have happened. The other option, I always try to think there's always not one single way to skin the cat. There's always different ways. You could have stayed there and you could have tried to fight it, but it would have been, and you might have won, but it would have been tough. In the document I'll send through, there's a whole bunch more description about where it comes from, its abilities, its hit points, yada yada yada. That in a slower time.
Brilliant, thanks. So when in doubt, run away. Got it.
Depends. Next, this is from Aiden. So Aiden, question 1. Whatever happened to Ningwen and her owlish subject? There's Ningwen. Here we go. And then her owlish subjects. This one here. So sadly, both Ningwen and the Ward of Dan, the creature up on screen is called the Ward of Dan, you may remember, were slain by Irini Chonta and her team of mercenaries from Manu Enlightenment in the island of Dan. The hero party, Grey wasn't with them then, but the hero party witnessed but was sadly unable to stop Ningwen being killed. Question 2. Now, Aiden is the only person that actually gets 4 questions. The reason being, one of his questions wasn't actually addressed to me. It was addressed to you guys, and this is the question. So the question that Aiden asked, question 2, was Grey missed by the team after he chose to join the other party? What was the fallout? He missed them. Over to the Twilight team to answer.
Oh, for sure. I think there was a little bit in the passage about that. Yeah, definitely well missed. Particularly, we obviously went one down in number, and yeah, you realise just how much Grey's presence mattered in combat. Particularly, I think we were a bit. The first couple of fights we had after Grey left were a bit wobbly, to say the least. So yeah, very much so. And of course for his sparkling wit and conversation.
And his
Mr. Humour.
His complex mind, Nicholas missed his complex and intricate mind. But also his versatility with his magic as well. He's got some very useful spells, which...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jada was wondering if a romance ever developed with him and Kyrios.
Could have happened. Different roll of the dice. We'd have a different game.
The romance is continuing, although Kyrios just shot Grey in the other game.
Yeah, but he also attacked her a few games before that, so, it's all
true.
fair.
It's true. All's fair in love and war. There you go. Cool. Any other comments before we flip back?
Yeah, I was going to say, if Grey's things are not working out for Grey, we've always got a spare couch back at Twilight if you come and crash a few nights.
I'd be very grateful to know that.
There you go. Lovely.
Actually, a big couch.
Yes. So there's your answer to that one. Aiden, question 3, arguably question 2. Was there a very memorable time that the team made a really lucky call or roll that saved them from a grisly fate? What about luck? Yeah, I thought long and hard about this answer. And here's a map coming up on the screen. So... yes, the call to get out of the Vault of the Righteous Ring for 2 reasons. The very first reason was on level 2 in room 35, so up here. You remember you came down these stairs and there was a pit at the bottom and there was fire at the bottom of the pit, you may recall that. You came in here and you came down here, and then the big nasty worm critter came out here and you fought it, and you ultimately got the lodestones about here. Yeah, that may or may not ring any bells.
Yeah.
But anyway, on level 2, this is level 2, in room 35, there was a very powerful undead creature, which some of you felt, and it was aware of you due to your previous combats. It was stirring. As you left, it was coming for you. Had some of your characters rolled poorly, it most likely would have snared you. Had you decided to confront it head on, it's probably likely with weight of numbers you probably would have triumphed, but highly likely at a cost. My guess was it was nasty enough to at least take down either one or 2 of you permanently. So, good call to get out of a situation. Yeah, this was a good call. That's the first reason for making a good call to get out of the situation. The second reason was this. On level 3, and you never got to level 3 because you decided to get out of here, and how you got down was down here. There was a pool here, and there was this light underneath the pool, and you would have been alerted to the fact there was some strange light under the water, and if you were brave enough to get down under the water and follow the light, you went down some kind of up and under and then down some more steps, and you would have found yourself on level 3. And on level 3 there was this throne room.
Before we continue, Chris, you might Strazko has joined.
Ah, nice one. Strazko, great to have you. Excellent. So we have both Matt, Strazko, and Marcus. Really, really great that you guys are joining us today. Hope you're enjoying the narrative, and of course, Strazko, you'll be able to catch whoever missed it, you'll be able to catch the full story, which I was told earlier on, which was superb. And we'll come to some questions from you guys if you fancy sticking around a bit later. Thanks, Pete, for the heads up. So yes, on level 3, there was this throne room with a very impressive collection of very obvious, weapons and loot, etc. here. However, 50 foot down in the pit surrounding the throne room were many hundreds, if not thousands, of undead ghouls or creatures, which looks like close up of them somewhere. That.
God.
Yep. Which were initially inert. This was a classic risk and reward scenario. That's how I had it in my head. If you were quiet, you probably could have got to the edge of this pit without disturbing them. However, getting across here and taking any of the loot immediately would have caused the... I don't know how many critters are there. Are there hundreds? Are there thousands? However many. The undead would certainly wake. Now, the critters were down, 50 foot down, but in their haste and in their eagerness to get at you and destroy you, they would have created a mound of bodies of each other, scrambling up over the top of each other, and they would have, with many of them being crushed, to get up to this tunnel. Would have taken about 6 rounds. So you would have got the loot, and then you had 60 seconds to get clear. They then would have chased your party all the way up through out of the Temple of the Righteous Ring and all the way through the in-between.
God.
Yep. Just for good measure, the creature back in room 35, which I showed you a second ago, would also have woken up and given you a few headaches on the way out. Now, the loot was pretty substantial, very substantial, but this was... And you guys would have presented with a problem. Do we go for the goodies, or do we leave well alone? So it was a case of the GM going, here's the bait. Do you feel lucky? And anyway, you chose to get out. So great question from you, thanks, Aiden. That was probably the one that I would answer for that. And then the last fourth question / third for Aiden was, quote, are you the voice, I'm assuming this is addressed to me, are you the voice that Grey hears in his mind before he's about to do something brave or stupid? Response, I may well be Grey, or perhaps you, Grey, are just imagining the voices, who can say? That is Aiden's questions. Pete, which is one of Graham's questions, as it turns out. In all our adventuring, what was the most significant thing we missed? Were there scenarios or items that we completely missed the point of? And I thought long and hard about this, and my answer is not a lot really, but perhaps one key thing. You were granted the ability to travel with guides effectively anywhere at no cost. Now, there was a risk of those guides in those different locations turning on you, but on balance, that offered a huge advantage for you to learn in advance about your enemy inside Turong. And again, trying not to shuttle you just down one narrative, I did try to give you another option with the shortcut, and I thought you might have taken the shortcut, as you ended up doing, and jumping on the one-way jump to Krakoa. But I had thought you might see the benefit of using the guide network and using a combination of teleporting jumps and ship journeys, etc., to get to the Star's Grave. And I write here, during such a journey, a lot more about the life and politics of Turong would have been uncovered, and there would have been much stronger potential for you gaining allies on the way. So in my head, it wouldn't have just been Twilight going into the valley. You probably would have had another 5 or 10 people with you. Did your choice of going via the shortcut that you ended up taking dramatically ruin the outcome? No. But you likely would have had a richer story without that jump, and your trip to Krakoa would have been more certain. The choice, as I say, however, was as always, is yours. You did ask in that question of things that you missed. I would say not things that you missed exactly, but storylines or subplots which I thought might be investigated, side quests, if you will. Sorry, I just want to check something just to make sure the recording's still ticking on, as it is. Yes, it is. Cool. So side quests that I thought you might end up doing. One was Jadar starting her own hospital. One was Nicholas in the warehole. Was Nicholas going to complete that or not? Askell and his mistress, was that going to unfold any further? The murder of Grey's master. And then Ningwen's options. So I'm not going to read it all out now, but Ningwen gave you a whole list of options. There were, in fact, 9 of them. 9 different things you could have done. You ended up actually doing 3 of them. But there are other options like investigating Tikos cells or going out and chasing other clues about Aelthrix or Devil's Dust. I thought you might go and do, which, there was no right or wrong answer. I just thought you might have done. What happens to the guides that led us to the Vale of Whispers? This is not a particularly exciting answer. They were slain by the blueskins at Odana's farm. Pure
Bastards.
and simple. Yeah, pure and simple.
They were. Back.
What's that?
We're going back.
You're going back. I mean, they were from different tribes to begin with, and the residents of Odana's farm were still mourning the fact that one of their number had been slain in battle. And basically, one evening, the Odana farm residents got drunk and angry, picked up some weapons, travelled the 20 or 30 minutes down to where your guides were, and chopped them up. So yeah, not particularly exciting, but that is what happened. What are your strengths and weaknesses of our party, in your opinion? So I said, look, moderately good spread of skills across the party. Someone who could sneak, Tanya. Someone who could talk and charm, Severin. A good number of people who can fight, Yotto, Severin, Tanya, and Askell. But absolutely critically, someone who can heal. Without Jadar, you guys would have been in a lot of trickier situations, which you referenced in the comments before. Weaknesses, this is tough and subjective, and as the GM, where you know all the stuff and you know all the options, it's really, really easy for me to pick holes or to make suggestions. You guys were operating on limited information, as all role-playing parties do, and you did what was best at the time. So these comments of weaknesses are not meant to be highly critical or anything like that. They're just simply what came to my head. First one was not having someone who is a pure spell user with quote-unquote conventional magic skills, i.e. quote-unquote sometimes a fireball is exactly what you need. This didn't massively hamper you though, as there were still people that could fly, turn others invisible in the party, etc, etc. I did write sometimes not everyone working as a team, and or sometimes making some tactical questionable decisions, in my opinion. And again, I stress, really, really, really effing easy for the GM to make such a comment. because I know all of the scenarios, I see the maps, and I think, as I write here, as I think most likely every GM or DM would say the same. These were your characters in the game, and ultimately your fun, and you played the characters in the situation that you saw it. So just a thought. And I'm singling one person out here, and this is potentially a margin call, and it's not meant to be singling you out, Stara. But one comment was, and we had a chat about this when you went up a level one time. I was wondering if Jadar could have contributed to combat a bit more, maybe. And I write here, clearly not as a frontline fighter, of course, unless absolutely necessary, such as you did with the Fire Demon. But I did wonder if she could perhaps get somewhere safe and using her sling to help the party out. I do go on and write, I totally understand, Stara, why you chose to keep Jodar safe, often invisible. If she died, likely the party was in very, very, very serious trouble, or probably dead. Again, she was your character. You played her the way you saw fit, of course, and there is utterly no right or wrong. It's just simply my opinion, and what on balance is right. If she had taken an injury, or if she had been knocked unconscious, or if she had been whatever, there's probably a pretty good likelihood that one of the party members would have died. So, it's swings, roundabouts, just a thought. Stara's questions. Who were Jadar's parents? And why did they adopt her out? And are they alive? So, Jadar was born to powerful Thamazulian high-blood family who feared the omen of her birth. She was born with green eyes. She was hidden and then abandoned for political survival. Both parents remained alive, maintaining the fiction that she was lost. Jadar also recalls, in the dim, dark recesses of her mind, some reference to having a twin brother, perhaps. Maybe. Maybe not. Who knows? Stara, great question. What would have happened had Bostrod stayed inside Jadar longer? The full document I'll send through will give you more on this. But basically, Bostrod would have progressively eroded Jadar's identity and fate, eventually using her as a stable breach anchor. So Jadar would have remained functional, but completely cosmologically compromised. So she wouldn't. It was like her soul would have been taken, but her ability to manage fate and for her ability to manage destiny would have effectively been gone. In the document, you can read about emotional parasitism, fate leeching, and partial eroding of Jadar's spirit, as well as some continuing physical erosion. So you may recall, Jadar, at the time, your hair, you had complete hair loss, you were getting scaly skin, and you were getting slightly slitted eyes. Those would have continued, but they would have halted. It was actually more around your fate and your ability to control things that would have got increasingly more disabled. Nasty, really nasty. And Askell absolutely did, Askell was amazing where he came in to save you. So if he hadn't, it would have been very, very bad. Stara, what happened in the in-between when we rolled 50s or doubles? We would either get pulled up or downwards. What would have happened if we went... This is a great question. What would have happened if we went all the way up or down? So, as mentioned above, in answer to Graham's question, what triggered the sudden transportation of the in-between? If you remember those two factions of gods, Fate-led, who wanted to end magic, religion, and actually their own end, were trying to pull your characters down into the eternal flame, or up into the terrible light. Ultimately, should one of your characters had gone all the way down or up, that character would have found themselves in the realm of the divine, and with some insanely angry, fate-led divine beings attempting to exact their hatred. While at the same time, other divine beings would have been there to try to save you. In essence, your character would have found themselves basically helpless, unless you had particularly powerful elemental magic, and at the heart of and cause of a divine civil war. And I don't know if you ever watched me when you guys were making those rolls, either when we played in person or when we played afterwards, but I remember being very, very, very twitchy about your characters making those rolls, because I really had no idea what was going to happen if you went either up or down. It's not going to be good, but it's going to be quite decisive. Finally, Giles. What is the best item our caution meant we missed out on? I split this up, Giles, in terms of two chunks. In terms of caution, I gave two answers to this, and I also gave an answer based on just bad luck, bad perception rolling. So on the third level of the Vault of the Righteous Ring, the actual image that's up on the screen, your caution prevented you from getting a whole bunch of really potent undead weapons. Undead Bane, short swords, magic to slay the undead. A lightning crossbow bolt, which fires lightning bolts at the undead. A wand of undead paralysis. A shadow hook. This long hook will create a sphere of darkness 10-foot radius at will. It can also hook on to other forms of magical darkness, and you can kind of reel that darkness around, so move darkness around, and much, much more. As it says up on screen, loot was here, there was a lot of stuff there, but caution, perhaps rightly so, caused you to go elsewhere. Another element of caution, so another point of caution that's allowed you to miss out on some goodies, was in the Tikos cave on the beach. You guys missed out on a pretty amazing rapier, not that you guys necessarily use rapiers, but +3 essence spell adder, a necklace, a ×2 spell multiplier, a ring that casts fireballs per day, frost staff, cold ball, casting frost staff, purple balls of sleep, 50, 60, 70 high boxes full of high quality +5 or +10 broadswords, short swords, and daggers, and then lots of bulk items of poisons and herbs, etc., etc., etc. You elected to get out of there. I'll come to that in a second, and those goodies didn't come to you. In terms of poor perception rolls and bad luck, so this wasn't your caution being the reason you didn't get the loot. It was just simply a poor roll. Hidden in the Lords of Arcana complex, there were 6 gems. Each of them weighed 6 pounds each and were worth between 1,000 to 3,000 GP each to the right buyer. Bucket load of cash. There was a dragon slaying broadsword. There was a normal shield that did pretty amazing things. There was some earrings that did some pretty incredible stuff, and there were also 7 ingots of gold that was worth a lot of money. And that was just simply roll, didn't get, and didn't happen. Giles' second question: what was in the hole on Jewel Island that we couldn't get into? Fire, etc. Here we go. Here's the map. Oh, there was the smoke, etc. Pulled into. You may recall. Now, you may recall that was the rock shelf. That image should look familiar to all of you. And then just kind of off camera, off here, was this cave. Here's the cave. So Giles' question was, what was in the hole on Jewel Island that we couldn't get into? Fire, etc. I answer, ultimately a lot of pain and suffering. But while I think it was really hard, I think it was still doable. to capture, and perhaps with some luck and some advanced sneaking and scouting. So the whole, as you term it, was an old disused temple with around 17 to 19 defenders. Critically, with 2 mages or pure spell users. One of them was the nasty critter, this guy here that we talked a bit about before. As per the image, the choke point, which is here at 1, was a very narrow gap between packing crates and defenders with bows, spears, etc. here. On makeshift packing crate ramparts, and this was really tough to breach. The first cave, number 2, with around 10 to 12 defenders present, including spellcasters. They were typically hanging back a bit, and that was the crux of it. If you could breach that, you're probably okay. Number 3 on screen was a decoy room. There were some crates down there, but also a lot of oil on the floor. In other words, lots of flame, lots of caltrops, those spiky little traps, and basically a likely death hole for. So you came in, if you remember. So you fought your way through here, and there were 2 doors, one here, and a passageway down there. That passageway, number 3 and number 4, were dead ends, and were basically death traps, particularly number 3. Number 5 is the main door into the sanctum, and your main TPP TCOS target, sector chief, a guy called Malus or Malian, nicknamed codenamed the Black Baron, was stationed right here, with 2 men protecting him. The large main double door was well maintained and hard to destroy. At number 6, whoops, notes have just jumped off. At number 6, Number 6, the door to the inner room with sleeping mats, etc., does eventually lead all the way through into the inner sanctum. But the door was hard to smash and it was barred. Number 7, the door to the passageway to the inner sanctum. Again, this door was hard to destroy. You could have done it. There was another door at 8, which also led into the inner sanctum. Again, hard to destroy. Number 9 was a dead-end passage down here, which led on to sleeping mats and one of the mage's workstations here. Poison, magical research, etc. I did wonder if this place was somewhere that the attackers might either portal into or teleport into after some recon first off. There was another watch person here, another one here at 11 and 12. I go on to write, no doubt this was a very hard nut to crack, but with some more persistence you would have found that not every spell was cancelled at the opening, i.e. eventually the Whispling might have eventually got in. Otherwise, using my other thoughts of how you might be able to do this was using Keros to lob an ice ball into number 2, basically knock out a lot of people at once, and then rush the chamber. Or 4 and 5 people get boosted up over these makeshift ramparts and climb in at the same time, and or push over these packing crates or burn the packing crates were all ideas I thought you guys might come up with. When I wrote it up, I knew it was going to be hard, but I thought what with yourselves, and I'll put your allies up on screen. So there were 11 allies. There were also 6 in Twilight and 7 in Hero for 24. I thought, along with your allies here, and here's your buddy Yonton, who's level 8, he was reasonably tough. I thought with him as your allies, plus with Hero and with Twilight, might have been able to defend the well-entrenched defenders here. Yeah, I mean, there were however many's up there on screen, I think 19 or so defenders. Again, I go back to the point that it's easy for the GM to think that, again, knowing the whole situation. So those are the baddies that you were facing. These were the ones that you, these were the allies that you met on the, well, semi-allies that you met on the bench. And then the very, very last question from Giles, this concludes my questions, is as follows. Who are the Mon Men? In essence, the Mon Men are the Old Order. Formally starting in 1468, or 318 years ago, the Mon Men Society is an international secret society dedicated to stamping out the United Peasants' Party movement and protecting the status quo. Their founding document, known as the Divine Right of the Rich, is translated into a variety of different languages. It's considered an underground movement to some of their practices, noticeably the ritual sacrifice of the poor people. While the Mon Men officially started as a direct result of the finding of the ancient Lords of Arcana writings, in reality, unofficially they've existed long before that. In reality, they are not kings or rulers themselves, as ultimately the game that they play is far beyond whichever dynasty happens to rule which particular state or emperor at the time. But rather, they are the ones that pull the strings of the institutions which make the world work. Institutions such as government, commerce, magic, and religion. They are the ultimate all-seeking, all-knowing puppet masters, and their work, the pulling of the right strings at the right moment, have always been present. But with the rise of the UPP, which presented a fundamental, very real danger to the old order, they formalized their work. Those were your questions, guys. Phenomenal. Speaking of questions, do we have? Do we want to quickly? We have two of our audience members, Matt and Strazko, with us. Encourage you guys, drop any questions or anything you might be interested in into the chat, and we'll come to those in a second. Maybe just to round things off, I'd love to hear some daydreams, where your characters see themselves. Who would like to kick off?
I guess I can, just leading on from where we left off in the narrative, might be a useful place to start. I think, just from Severin's perspective, we heard about the tale when we were looking and hearing all about the devil dust. We also heard of some other secrets of the Lords of Arcana, particularly something called the hive mind, which pricked Severin's imagination. And although that was supposedly destroyed by several of the powers, obviously we know there are we know the location of at least 4 or 5 many other Arcana sites, and we're pretty certain that we're one of the few people who ever used the transporter. So his idea was that actually that might be something worth seeking, ultimately. And so his plan was to actually go back to Brascarrett and go down the Vale of Whispers, go back to the transporter, and actually continue the adventure and try and find this hive mind. Really, he's got a kind of taste for higher purpose, I think, more than anything. You know, he's for the first time in life he sort of felt important, like they've actually achieving something. So his thought is, well, what now? What more can we do? And I think that would be a good thing that he thinks that they could pursue. I guess his immediate problem is, though, that he knows that the Mon Men seem to know everything that was going on, and he doesn't know why. And it's possible that the last remaining Wonton got that information to the Mon Men. Maybe that was something that happened, or that actually one of them is maybe not even known to them is a leak. You know, is providing some sort of leak of information. So, I guess his most immediate thing is like, what do we do about that, and what's going on, and to sort of interrogate everyone and find out, you know, what's happening. Thereafter, if he would band whoever wants to come with him, he would go off and see what he could find. I think, you know, in his far distant future, and when something he might daydream about is that one day he would actually protect the hive mind, find some very powerful allies who want to see it installed, be a sort of protection force for the hive mind, and to work without borders, external to nations, as a sort of keeper of the peace, if you like, a sort of elite knighthood that protects the hive mind, but also could get involved in conflicts and get between adversaries who conquerors and ambitious sort of totalitarian types, and act as sort of peacekeepers in the world. That's his big dream, that one day he could be involved in a different way of running things, and a way of kind of bringing the world to a more kind of peaceful and well ordered sort of place.
Nice. UN in the World of Duyranaki. Nice one.
Absolutely.
Someone else? Oh, hang on, I'll put these characters up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have done that with Haskell. Here's Haskell.
Cool. Yeah, for Haskell, after they've obviously hung out in Jivaratana for a bit, he'd actually like to go back to Shabibi on his own to rest and recover for some weeks or months. He knows he's going to have to re-link in with his mistress, and there's a couple of reasons for that going back there. Rest and recover. He wants to devote some time to study of new spells, because he found in this outing over the last months,
This little
he
jaunt.
was a little bit lacking in his magic and spells. A bit more physical conditioning and weapons training, sort of just round him out a bit more, increase the thing, bulk up a bit, etc. The focus on his mistress, I guess it like just working on what's happening there to regain her trust, and to just understand a bit more. Then the intent would be, once he feels he's regained her trust, he would like to seek out the Twilight Party again to assist with removing her from his mind. Yeah, and just leave that as a adventure hook. At some point, leave lots of threads open type thing. He expects he would continue adventuring with the Twilight, possibly even Hero Party, having met them, or even another party.
He hasn't had enough either. He wants more. After all this horror and bloodshed and nastiness, he wants more. Well, glutton for punishment.
Yeah. And at some time in that year's being half out, I guess he, without the prospect of dying, expects he would adventure for at least another 40, 50 years. But he expects he will have a love interest, which could mean children. It could mean stepping off the adventurer's trail for a patch and perhaps a small cottage, some land, part of the community, grow some vegetables type of thing as well.
Daddy
But, always the call of adventuring or standing up what's for right, joining the UN, coming back to the UN as well. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
cool.
Thank you. Pop some other kind of memento documents in there. Have a read if you're interested. Just going to pause there for a second. We're okay taking a question. Well, I'm going to take a question for a sec. Matt, thank you. Again, congratulations all. My question is, what methods did you all use to maintain your collective continuity during such a long campaign? Thoughts on that? You're on mute, Graham.
We have a back channel that we use between games.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, well, it's normally it's a sort of trail of unrealized plans and vain hopes, really.
Often it's the GM.
Yeah, but you know,
Are there
yeah,
swear words against the GM?
No, but there were we had a lot of plans, and they do normally fall apart within the first few minutes of attempting them. So, but we at least we tried.
Nice. Thanks for the question, Matt. Who would like to supply another daydream? Where does their character end up next? Thanks, Matt, for the question. Somebody else, come on.
Oh, I can go.
Sure, Pete.
So for Nicholas, his where to next for him would be several stages of this. I guess first thing would be he would want to so if we've been cleared by the Monmen sort of to be no longer targets, he assumes that this is all going to calm down, and yeah, he would feel once he's feeling safe, he'd want to go to, I think, the biggest city in the known world, which is Bansheeba. I assume that's got quite a good university. He'd want to go there and set himself up to continue his research into mines, and he'd want to move to the big city like he's always wanted to do. He's a city sort of person. So that's his life from then on. That's his ultimate goal. During other times, or before doing that, whenever these would fit in, he'd be keen to give the finger to the tradition of Werehull, and he'd enlist either the Twilight's assistance, or he'd investigate hiring mercenaries to go to Kinsale, find Gildwyn O'Cathan of Kinsel's tribe, and frickin' just do to them. Get his family's ring back, and because he's probably not, as part of this Werehull thing, he's probably not supposed to enlist help, or he doesn't care about that. He would now have the means and the connections to just go in and get that back, and just send a message that this stupid, he's pissed off at this tradition, and he'd just want to say fuck you to it, basically. So long as it's a safe thing for him to do. So that would be he'd be quite keen to just finish that off, and he'd go home and sort of drop the ring at his mother and say, well, there you go, done. They might be coming for you because I just dicked them over. Well, that's your problem. A little bit of that. He would be very keen to, very, very keen. So if the relationship between Askell and Dina is what it sounds like it is, Nicholas would be extremely keen to help banish Dina from Askell's mind. You can imagine why, because that sort of power and that sort of learning would be something he would want for himself. So he would happily go along to do that, and then just gather all the.
I'll have that. Thank you very much.
He doesn't necessarily want puppets particularly, or have doors into people's minds. But which was what Graham's impression of what happened with Dina and Askell is, whatever that turns out. But Nicholas is that's where he wants to be, basically. He wants to have that sort of information at his fingertips. And he would definitely be willing to explore further Arcana ruins with Severin.
Wow, again, not having enough. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's so many opportunities for learning. He would be quite keen, he's very keen to make sure that he was the one who got the reading glasses back, because those for his research, for his learning. He's only a man, so they could go back to whoever, to Grey, who's a half elf, who outlive him, whatever. But he would want to share them, but happy to share them, but would certainly want them.
Cool.
And just a note that I think that whilst he's a bit of a sick bastard sometimes, he's meaning it in the right way. It's just perhaps, yeah.
He's a psychopath, isn't he?
Well, a little bit, but it all makes sense to him. But his companions are excluded from any of that. He is true to his companions.
Love it. Somebody else, Jada or Tanya.
Giles has to go at 1. Does he want to go now?
Well, I guess Yotto sadly doesn't have a future, but I wonder if.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
But Giles, were there other? If Giles, you're off at 1. What? Any kind of questions, last thoughts? I'm conscious I've done a lot Well, I've had an amazing story told to me, but questions or thoughts from you, Giles?
I'm enjoying listening. It's interesting hearing what people are doing, and yeah, I will be heading off shortly, guys. So.
Okay, good. Somebody else. Jada or Tanya are the last two.
You go, Star.
So I think first Jada would help Askell get rid of the mistress from his head. Or if she couldn't heal it in some way, maybe try and kill the mistress. Askell can't have mistresses. Then maybe she's always searching for her parents, so that's never going to stop. But she'd probably work on opening her hospital, Healing Without Borders.
Yep.
And on the side, maybe open a clothing shop for large women. She's 6'7", so it's hard to find shoes.
Excellent.
She has a question for the party. What does bacon taste like? She might actually try and make some sort of textured vegetable protein that's like bacon, but then she realised she doesn't know what bacon tastes like.
Oh my god.
Nice.
It's her.
I'm sure there's some magic that could, simulate the taste.
Oh, thank you, Strazko. That's lovely, thank you. As a group, you have a nice vibe. They are a nice bunch. I mean, you play with people you like, right? And these people have been fantastic to play with. Thank you. Tanya, last summation, and then maybe some Q&A, and love to hear more from either Strazko or Matt, or other members of the party, or Aidan or Giles or whoever. Just kick it open. But yeah, Tanya next.
Yeah, I think Tanya could be convinced to sort of assist the party in their sort of more immediate problems, or things that she knows they've yet to be solved, particularly Nicholas's backstory, and she knows that something's not quite right with Askell. She doesn't know exactly what, but if that were revealed, she would seek to sort of to finish that and liberate him. But thereafter, I don't think she'd want to follow Severin down into dungeons again. I think she is surprised to be alive, quite honestly. I mean, in game terms, she's on her last lifeline, and she's felt like she's been clinging on for a while now. And ultimately, she has sworn to, when she came across some measure of wealth, which she has now, she would return to the city in which she came from, and assist her family, who have been outmaneuvered by powerful competitors. And so I think she would go home now. I think it's time. She's already lost her father. She's lost her godmother. There's been a lot of personal loss. She's been distracted from what she swore to do for a good while now. So I think she would probably depart party.
Wow.
And build her own life back in our home city again, and hopefully live a long life, which she fears she would not if she continued on. Definitely not. So I think that would probably be her next step. And just in turning back to Severin, I think most immediately, what I didn't say before is that he would suggest leaving a message in the Grand Bazaar Lodge for the hero party to meet back in 2 months' time. He would also leave a message he'd arranged a dead letter office for his to communicate with his mother. He's desperate to find news of her survival, so that's something he would want to do sooner rather than later. He would also leave a note there as well for the hero party, because Gray actually knows of that location too. So that's something that he would look to do. But yes, other than that, once the party is settled, and he'd be more than willing to muscle in on other sort of missions to with Nicholas and with Askell to put things right. I think he would be sympathetic, having seen what happened to Jada, would be sympathetic to Askell's position and hearing the voices, and would certainly want to get that sorted before they went on, because he would not mention the hive mind until Askell was cured, because he wouldn't want to know. I think he would immediately suspect that the mistress was communicating with the Monman, or perhaps part of that organization in some way. So he wouldn't do anything until that was sorted. But yeah, other than that, I think his lofty ambition, and in moments of hubris, he would imagine commanding an order of knights handpicked from across the world, true of heart, uncorruptible, with no ties to nationhood, church, or race, to safeguard the hive mind at all costs, and to direct a force that guards against conflict, and where necessary, insert themselves between warring nations, and where negotiations fail, represent a force for stabilization and peace, which has a ring to it. So yeah, and maybe he would even call on. He was impressed by the Leif in particular, from the hero party, the Mrs. Grey, and possibly even Etienne might want to join him. He has sort of, in terms of finding allies in the future, they were people that came to mind.
Excellent. Imagine Graham playing a bard. Yes, Strasco, absolutely. Nice. Yes, he would be great. I mean, I don't want to draw. If this is a natural conclusion, we can naturally conclude here, but I'd just throw the floor open to any other questions that you guys had, or any other thoughts, or stuff that's unresolved, or stuff you want to kick around, or whatever. Also, Matt and Strasco welcome any other questions or thoughts.
So, can I just check, Chris? The original arrangement was we were going to do 3 other questions each, but we're just sort of going to do a general discussion.
I think we'll just do. Yeah. I mean, 3 other questions. If you got them, chuck them in. Yeah, if you've got 3 other questions, go for it.
See if my message works. Yes. Does that look familiar in main chat?
Let's have a look. Oh God. Yes. Where was that from?
So I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Nicholas did his own little side quest to try and find Gildwyn in Jibirima, I think it was.
Yes.
Once we were sort of staying at the palace, and he went off and went down to the docks, and I got scared and didn't want to get him killed or whatever, right. So I just sort of stopped that way early. And on his way back, he found this rainbow cat, which was very unusual, and I think he patted it or whatever.
Yep.
And then on my notes, I've got rainbow cat tracking, appointment magic user to remove it, evening of the 27th, and then later, tracking spell gone, spelled. So the question is, what do you recall of that rainbow? I assume it's when we were sort of the focus of lots of spy agencies, because we had information about them. I just assume it was one of these other nations' spy agencies noticed Nicholas put some sort of spell on the cat that transferred to Nicholas, I'm assuming, but I just wanted to... do you happen to remember?
I hate and love the fact that you take such meticulous notes, Pete. I think you're spot on with your recollections. I think the rainbow cat was just a cool image that the GM saw and you chucked into the game.
It also occurred. Cool, but it was no more than like
no. I'd totally forgotten about that, and no effing idea. Cool. Other questions?
I had one, and I don't know. Maybe it's might be one of those on the spot ones. Did the Mistress Dina ever take a partner? So that's more for Askel's probably recollection. And if yes, were they still around?
I think Dina is a complete predator. So Dina has probably had plenty of, not partners, because that partner involves being equal. Dina is an utter predator, and she would have had plenty of men and women in her lives, but they would have just been castaway tools, etc. She is utterly ruthless, and there would be people around her. And if you recall Askel's background, Askel got to know some of those people around her. But Dina is an utter psychopath, and very charming and can be very pleasant. But yes, she would have had plenty of people in her lives, but not true equals, not a partner as such.
I've got to ask.
Yeah.
Basilius. I've no idea what Basilius was. We played played. It was really fun, and he did some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But was he a vampire? I mean, I just
Okay. Okay. So, could you just describe, please, because this character was in play long before.
I'll explain. I didn't have a picture reference, or I would have.
Yeah, no, I've got one coming.
Put him up. But basically, we discovered this guy imprisoned in the middle of a jungle, and from the description, and from the image that we had, he looked very much like he was a vampire of some sort. He was quite mysterious.
There he goes.
Well, there you go. Or some sort of Gary Newman fan or something. But he was very eccentric, and he had a sort of variety of different skills, and I couldn't for the life of me work out what he was at all. And it was a lot of fun because he would just do quite random stuff sometimes, when I never really got. Then he departed, tried to kill the Pope or whatever he was, and then we parted company. But I was none the wiser, I have to say.
Okay, so this was a character created by one of our former players, a chap called Jared. Jared, I don't know if you're watching, and I haven't looked over these notes. When did I create these notes with Jared? April 2021, and I don't think I've looked at these notes since April 2021. So these are going to be an experience for me too. So I'm reading these for the first time since April 2021. Known as kid-slaying parasite to vampires, generally speaking, his name is considered offensive in some circles. Call sign Roma amongst vigilantes, uses the undercover name. Very fast and sneaky. Backstory: Basilius was born 90 years ago, wealthy family. So we've got a backstory for Basilius. He was born in Macedonia. I'm recalling the character, and he was basically Jared wanted to play a vampire, and I said playing a vampire in this game ain't gonna work. But don't know if you guys noticed, but I tried to keep everybody happy with what they could play. Sometimes to my detriment, Pete. Because some players are very crafty, not looking at anybody, Pete. And they yeah, exactly. You read the rule books. Hey, who's the idiot here? It's me. So no question on you, Pete. So well played. I tried to keep people pretty happy with whatever random they wanted to play. So where we came up was he had vampire touched, I think, was it? So he had sensitivity. That's right. God, I haven't looked at this for years, as I say. So he was kind of a half. He had vampiristic tendencies, and I think from memory, he was keen on the fell gods, the resources of the undead, and all kinds of stuff. So he was not a vampire. He was, but he had been touched by a coven of vampire-like creatures. It's probably the closest thing. So I tried to keep Jared happy, and I think Jared had fun playing him. And as you say, he was a very, very random character, probably the most random in this campaign. But he was fun. Jared was happy. So
it's good Dr. Evil thing going on there.
He does. He does. Yes, $1 million exactly. Any other questions, thoughts? Anything?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Go for it.
You've answered some, but I was asking if we'd ever come to team annihilation, but you've sort of answered that. But do you remember near the end, there were these floating creatures that were asleep, and if we bumped them, they made these ugly faces, and we just gapped it. What would have happened if they woke up? Do you remember?
Sleeping creatures.
Are these the Mirages and the Lords of Arcana, the banqueting hall and the image, and then the ones when we made our way through?
These things here.
Yeah.
By the way, I've just seen another question from Matt, another question from Strazco, so we'll come to those in a second. In terms of answering your question, Stara, goodness. I'm just thinking where to find them.
Or just whether they were good or bad.
Yeah, they were neither, and they weren't really there. It's probably the best way to describe it. I just want to show the image because get access to just trying to think the fastest way to find the image. I wonder how many images I actually have. Quite a lot.
They had a lot of teeth. I remember that.
I've got the banqueting one.
Oh, lovely, Pete. I'd love
Yep.
that. Yeah,
Well, a
thank
couple
you.
of just from the documents you sent through earlier today. I just took a screenshot.
Oh,
That's
great.
okay.
Yeah, thank you. That would be hugely helpful. So just to check, Starro, what you're referring to is that, right? Was that it?
I
Yeah.
think so. I just remember they were hanging there asleep, but if we bumped into them, which I did, they woke up and gave
Oh.
a really horrible face.
Ah, yeah.
And then we just jumped out the hole and flew away.
Yes. So they weren't actually necessarily them. They were other features of that complex. So
Yep.
that is the right complex. Thanks,
Okay.
Pete. Hang on, I'll just see what screen I've got up on. Put it back so the viewers can see what we're talking about. So that's the right complex, but the other creatures, they were. If you read up on the answers I've put through about the resonant echo, so there's basically these fractures of the past from thousands of years ago, and these creatures that you came across were semi-real, but not quite of your time. Had you bumped and you bumped into them, you're right. You were going through. There were some that were flying, etc. Yotto was there, Askell was there, and I think Jadar was there. They had power in the halls of Arcana because that's where they had been tethered and they had a relationship with that place. So had you bumped into them as you did, and had they been fully alerted, they would have done some damage on you. I doubt they would have killed you, but they certainly would have messed you up a bit. But absolutely, they wouldn't have followed you out of that complex. They were tied in space and time to that complex. So, yeah. So bad stuff would have happened. They weren't really there. They were there, but they're not there. They're kind of halfway in between a slightly different reality.
Right. Okay, the other one is about other monsters we've fought. So it's thinking of M.E.R.P, Fire Giant, and the big tentacle things in the in-between.
Yep.
Was there an easy way to kill them that we just missed? Like, could we just have waved a fan and the Fire Giant would be put out? Or M.E.R.P, was there a switch somewhere?
Let me, I'll tell you what, GM's going to pause on that. Great questions. Thanks, Pete, for the additional questions. Let's go back to. I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to try to answer that question. I'm going to go back to a comment from Matt. Always good to know that all parties can focus on the interesting but incidental item NPC. Love that. Yeah, totally. People get fixated on the goblin that the GM makes up on the fly, right? Matt, always happens. Strazko asks, and we'll definitely come back to your question, Stara. Strazko asks a simple question first. Some were obvious, but what were the profession and levels of all the party? That's a really good question, because of course people, our viewers may not know. So, in no particular order, can you guys answer that while I desperately try to come up with an answer to Stara's questions? Go for it, guys.
Jada was a lay healer, level 9, but identified as level 1. I never know what I'm doing.
That is not true. You knew very well lots of things you did, I reckon.
Excellent. Others, guys? Let's switch back to this one.
Askell was a level 8 warrior mage. At times felt he couldn't hit the side of a barn door.
Yotto was the same. He was a level 8 warrior mage, and sometimes he was the barn door. So, and I am going to have to go, guys. So look, it's been great fun, and thanks for all your hard work, Chris. It's,
Cheers,
really
Giles.
appreciate it.
Cheers, Giles. Thank you.
Giles.
See you.
Thanks, Giles.
See you, Giles.
See you.
I've got a boost as well. Open homes to go to. But
Nice one. Cool.
thank you very much. I look forward to catching the tail end on the record.
You bet. See you,
Nice.
Anthony. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Anthony.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
And to you.
You too. Bye.
Who wanted to finish off those?
I'll talk about Nicholas. Yeah, so he was a bit of an odd one. He ended up being level 9. His profession is Mentat, which is Rolemaster Companion. No, from Spell Lore 2, actually, I think.
Yep.
And Mentats are mentalism spell users, but they get to, instead of having the usual 10 or 8 or whatever it is, base spell list, they get less. But they... I think you regretted this, Chris. They get to choose the base spell list.
You think?
Yeah. Well, in a viable profession.
No, you took full advantage, and the only person to blame here is me.
They get to choose their base spell lists from across, a fairly limited selection. No, not a bit. Yeah, from open and closed lists of all 3 realms, as well as some of the base spell lists of other mentalist professions. So that's why Nicholas has Lofty Bridge, which is he's a mentalism spell user. He had Lofty Bridge as one of his base spell lists. He had Invisible Ways as one of his base spell lists, and he had Spirit Mastery as one of his base spell lists, as well as a Seer base list as one of his base lists, and Evil Mentalists lists as his base lists. Strangely enough, but yeah, quite an odd sort of profession to be able to quite powerful to be able to select from different realms.
Yes.
So that was Nicholas, 9th level Mentat.
Nice. Just before we continue, just checking times for others. Do we want to give it another 20 minutes? Wrap there? Are people having to head away earlier? What are people's timings like?
I'm easy.
I'm easy.
What was that, Sarah?
Easy.
Easy. Aiden? Oh, we'll keep chatting for a bit anyway.
Yep.
Graham.
Severin is a level 10 swordsman, so pretty much a warrior really, but one who has trained specifically in one weapon, in his case the sword, and obsessively seeking mastery in that weapon. So that's where sort of he came from. Pretty much, other than that, your typical tank. That was the character I rolled up level 1, and then I took on Tenya, who we met very early on when the adventure started. She is a hunter, so someone who mixes outdoor skills with stealth and fighting. The character did sort of change somewhat in that we had a sort of dedicated sneaky thief for a while, Alice, who flashed up on screen earlier. She died, so I kind of had to adjust Tenya a little bit in lieu of having a proper thief, and so Tenya took on more kind of traditional sort of detect traps, unlock pickpockets and all that kind of thing, unlocking doors and what have you. So as the time went on, she sort of, her skills widened somewhat as time went on. But she was quite an unusual one because given she was supposedly, she's of noble birth, yet she was a hunter. It was an odd one to get her head around. But she was interesting. I can't survive. I'm amazed she survived, actually. It's incredible.
To be honest, same here.
Yeah.
She was on her last life for a long time. That's Alice up on screen. Great image.
Yeah.
Cool. So back to Stara's question. And thanks for the question, Strasco. Keep them coming, either Matt or Strasco. Most welcome. In terms of the creatures that you came across, and were they able to be defeat it. I mean, hang on, I'll just go back to this screen. Yeah, I mean, I always try to have an idea of a way that you would defeat them. So, for example, going back to that creature, what did you call it, Graham? The windy creature, or whatever it was, the resonant echo. It was slow, so you figured out that actually it was slow and you could outrun it. The massive tentacled thing in the in between, that was colossal, and that was definitely a monster that the GM put there to make you guys run away, and also shake up the game. So, I talked earlier about the reasons why to put you in the in between, from both a narrative story point of view and also just for other reasons. I did realise that once I put you in this very long, complex, intense dungeon, that it was taking forever to go through. So I chucked a hand grenade into the narrative, which was a big, nasty creature which destroyed half the dungeon, so you couldn't explore there, basically. So that really was not a creature that I was expecting you to fight at all, and realistically, your characters would have died very quickly. The metal Mickey, as you guys like to term them, I don't have an easy image of him up on the screen, but Pete, you're going to do it for me. Thank you.
What's his real name?
He didn't actually have what did I call him? I think he was just simply a construct, just metal construct. He was definitely susceptible to spells, so he was definitely susceptible to elemental attacks. Now, you guys, as mentioned earlier on in this Q&A session, you guys didn't have a character that was especially powerful at throwing lightning balls or fireballs or whatever, but you had some of those, so those would have been really effective on him. Let me check my notes. What did I say on?
What I liked about that little scenario was that we ended up using a magical item that we'd been kicking around for years and we'd never used and almost forgot we had, and then it turned out to have a use years later, which was great, which was the heavy metal amulet, which was invaluable.
It worked
really good idea.
It worked really well. Let me have a look. Just gonna find my notes. Go back to. Oh, Aiden, just while I'm finding my notes, there was a question from Strazco of what level and profession characters were. Could you fill our listeners in for Greg, please?
Sure. Sorry, I was just quickly getting something to eat.
No worries. No worries. All good.
So Gray is now level 9, and his profession is a Beastmaster, so he's got some level of control over animals. But he's got like a really interesting ability where he can kind of learn any kind of magic, which makes him pretty an interesting character to play, because he has also now extended his magic into Essence Wing, which means he can fly and he can float other people, and he can also create illusions, and he can what was his other skill list? He can create illusions, and I'm trying to remember what else he can do. There's quite a few things, and I think as time goes on, if he's got the ability to, he'd probably quite like to get into the elemental stuff now that he's seen what Keris can do. Yeah, he's pretty awesome like that. And then we've got Demos as well. But he's not the other game. But he's level 9 as well, and he is just a warrior. He's got no magic ability at all.
Yes.
But he does have a magical spear.
He does. Nice one. And of course, Gray lives on. You know, Gray is still playing in the other game.
But now,
yeah, he does. So, construct is what I called it. Modest intelligence, possesses in-dart, chakram thrower, hand axe, 1 attacks per round, unusable in melee, 14 foot tall, large creature crit, no stun, no hits per round. can attack twice per round, once with a great sword and once with a short sword. Its base movement rate was 80 foot. Does large creature hits. And in later notes, I did put something in, I just couldn't find them. In later notes, I put something about elemental, susceptible to elemental magic. Snake construct, which you fought, that was there, right up. So, look, a mixture, Stara. Sometimes I deliberately put in a thing that you've got to find about how to defeat the baddie. Sometimes, however, I just chuck something at you and let's just see what you guys do. Really, just a mixture.
Would it have reactivated? We were paranoid about that.
No.
No, good right.
No, you shut it down. You shut all of them down.
Right.
And it was away from its power base, so you fritzed it. It was gone. Oh, thanks, Pete. And if we go back to another screen, go back to the Discord screen. You've put some notes in there. You've put some images in there. Thanks, Pete. So there's the constructs. That there. Then the fire elemental. One of the construct dogs, construct snakes. Strasgo, I still remember the image that ran through my head when Grey was sniffing around using perception. Yes, Grey likes a good sniff, Strasgo, definitely.
Just note, Chris, just one comment there on the construct dog. In your summary document, there's that pit trap. And if we're talking about...
Yes.
If we're talking about times... down a bit. If we talk about the times when we got very, very lucky, there was one really good perception roll that Tanya made that found the catch to flick to disable the...
Totally. So
put the bridge across this thing. And,
that's right. So in that document, had Tanya not made that perception roll, you guys would walk straight into that trap, for sure. Yeah. No, good point. If you can pull up the image, Pete, we can talk about that.
It's there. It's there on the dog one. Further down a little bit.
That is too.
A very small image, but yeah.
So this was an image from. I've just seen another question from Strasco. We'll come back to. I'll pull it up on the big screen. The GM is multitasking today, so you can see it's hard to see, but can you see it's not well. You can see it better there. So the idea of this horrible trap was a very, very, and it's not my idea, a very visible trap that you have to jump over. You can see the tiny figures up on screen, so you guys may recall you saw the pit with the spikes. Oh, it's a jump. It's a doable jump. It's hard, but it's doable. You jump over the other side, and then immediately the ground gives way to a hidden pit trap, and down you go. And yes, well remembered, Pete. Had Tanya not made an amazing perception roll, she wouldn't have noticed the mechanism which prevented that pit trap, or closing that pit trap up, actually, and a little bridge coming out. So yes, well remembered. Back to question from one of our audience members. I'll put it up on screen, actually. I only saw some of the attack in the packing crates by the two parties. What came to mind was a number of things. Lots of participants getting initiative orders sorted, coordinating attacks. Also players trying to be mindful of each other cause a lot of disorder. That's right. There's a question here for Chris, I think. Any thoughts on how to suggest a coordinated attack could be done by the parties that might benefit from? Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I mean, about the only thing that comes to mind, Strasco, is basically everybody saying we all act at the same time, and we all act when the slowest person on initiative acts. So, for example, let's say there were 5 characters present, and actors 1, 2, 3, 4 say we're poised, ready to jump as soon as the slowest person acts. When the slowest person acts, everybody's initiative has happened. Yeah, kind of clunky. And look, sometimes I've definitely acknowledged this about my own GMing style. I always have done, and Pete, you've played with me for a long time, I do tend to often sweat the small stuff. I can often kind of get down into the minutiae and who goes next and actually sometimes I need to be better at saying kind of screw it and let's just move the narrative on. So great question.
Just to add to that, I think we definitely toyed with that. I think one thing we nearly did was jump through the barricades, like over the top, like two. I happened to be playing the two agile acrobatic characters, of two of them jumping through at the same time as the others went through the past the caltrops and into the kill zone in there. Nearly did it. Glad I didn't, because I don't think the others weren't getting through there. Severin was out for the count, as I remember. A lot of people were really bad, in a bad way, and at that point we turned and fled. Had they have jumped through in a coordinated attack, I think both would have died. And now I've seen how many people were stacked up behind the crates.
The floor got set on fire as well, I think.
There was lots, wasn't there? And there was sort of point blank crossbow bolts flying everywhere, and it was a bit of a we were in all sorts of mess. We Karios dead, who's our most powerful spell user. It was we were in a bit of a bad way. So actually, I think that decision to turn and flee was probably the right one.
It probably was, and there's always interesting when you as I've touched on before, always interesting when you're kind of sitting on the outside and able to make a suggestion. Where's my images? Here's the kill zone, etc. I mean,
we were also without magic.
With Keros being killed, yes. The other party did have a magic user, but the GM was perhaps a little bit reticent about utilising them. Just seen a question from Matt about magic. We'll come back to it in a second. But that question, I mean, some of that, Strasco, look, it could have been down to... I think you could have... Mechanically, the GM I could have organised that with everybody acting on a certain time. So I think we have done that before, haven't we? Where everybody says we all go at one time. But it can be a bit clunky.
I think, can I just add a couple of things? I think that perhaps the way it worked out perhaps was a little bit more realistic. People getting confused and fucking things up because, perhaps that's actually how things work. And also, but I just thought with the magic thing, was as far as we knew, we couldn't do magic in this place.
That's right. That's right. You had.
It kept failing, didn't it? Yeah.
It failed 3 times. I'd have to check my notes, but it wasn't a case of it failing permanently. So there were certain odds of it getting through. So I guess had you wanted to stick around and try out a bit more experiments, you probably would have realised that you could get a spell through. But to your point, Pete, about realism, the floor was on fire. Keros had just had her heart and her lungs burnt out by acid. A number of people had been shot. I mean, it wasn't a good day.
No, I mean, when we first talked about it, the plan was for Karios to cold ball behind the crates immediately at the front. That would hopefully, but then that's an area of effect spell, so that would have been quite nasty. Then for the more lithe characters to jump in through the holes in the crates while the warriors piled in through the gap. Maybe it would have worked. I don't know. We had it, but it fell apart. I think we had one character down, and then some other characters picked up the wounded character, made off with them just as we were about to attack. So we were in a bit of disarray, really.
Yeah. Nicholas was planning on, if possible, catching the view of someone and getting them possessed by a demon behind the enemy lines.
Oh, yeah,
so they would go homicidal behind the crates. But he was really badly injured in the acid. So
the
dice rolls, right?
Yeah.
Question from Mats. Chris, you mentioned the party potentially benefiting from an additional pure spellcaster. What would the class be? Good question, Matt. I mean, maybe just a pure vanilla mage, really. Just a bog standard, Rolemaster, mage, or perhaps like Keros with an element of storm mage or something like that. But someone that can access essence, basic stuff like lofty bridge, so being able to move and teleport, as well as offensive spells. Yeah, probably just a pretty vanilla mage. It was kind of in my head, but maybe something else.
I think when the game started, we we all rolled our characters up in isolation.
Yes.
And in fact, it was my first time playing Rolemaster, and most people actually. So it's kind of fortuitous we ended up with Jada, really.
Yep.
We had a very good-hearted soul who was playing Jada from the beginning, who did a lot of charity work himself. Yeah, he was brilliant, and so he wanted to play a healer, and it's not everyone who wants to play a healer, right? So that was great, and yes, it was quite random. So we didn't end up with a pure spell user just because the people, at the beginning decided not to roll one. So it wasn't a so coordinated attempt to form a functioning party.
It was, and where that came from me was as a GM, I wanted people to play what they wanted to play. I wanted to give people maximum fun, which is what the game's about, I guess. Comment from Strasco. Yeah, I'd thought the same on this. I guess that's back to the comments earlier on. To the lowest initiative score, yes. To Graham, over the wall together. Likely would have got ugly with climbing rolls to rely on. Someone's bound to have got the crap moral. Yeah, very true. Very true, very true.
For sure.
Because it's Sod's Law and it's Rolemaster and it's brutal. Other questions, comments, thoughts, anything else we need to tease out?
I'm unfortunately I've got to shoot off. But thank you so much for creating this game and letting me be a part of it. And I really enjoyed playing with all of you guys. It was awesome. I was very sad. It was really hard to choose to move Gray to the other team, but it felt like that's what his character would probably do. Just really, really grateful that I got to play with you guys and got to see the story out. And thanks.
Nice one.
Yeah, I think generally, Chris, just I think a massive thanks. I mean, the labour of love that this campaign. I mean, it's been massive. 6 years of your life, right? Something that we've managed to actually see through to the end, which I think you've said before. It often doesn't happen. These things can sort of peter out, and kudos to you, and congratulations on constructing such a riveting narrative that's sort of kept me thinking, of God, my God, what are we going to do now every other week? I know it's been a massive amount of work and a real labour of love. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Agree.
Most welcome.
Agreed.
Thank you, guys. Well, is that a place to end it? Thank you, Graham. Is there anything else that people want to touch on?
Another question.
Oh.
It's from
Strasco, this is the end of the group. It is. Today is farewell. Today is. The hero game is still playing, but for this group, this is the very last time after 6 years that the camera is rolling, and today is goodbye. So, smile at a sad face. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, look, on that, guys. Well, maybe Aiden, if you could, unless there's anything else burning, and if there is, let me know.
Just a quick question for our listeners. Have they actually heard them all, or are they still catching up? Or watched or listened?
Strasco's typing. And Matt's typing. Oh, waiting with bated breath, right? I don't want to keep. If you need to shoot, mate, shoot.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys, and thanks all of you. It was really wonderful to meet all of you and play with you, and hopefully in the future we'll see each other again.
Oh well, Aiden.
Yeah, for sure.
See you.
See you soon.
Bye.
See you guys.
See you next week.
nice one. Bye.
Bye. Matt. No, not all, I'm afraid, but about 3 years worth. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Strasco, I think I'm all. Don't forget, of course, Matt, we've only recorded since 2023 because we didn't record a lot of this stuff. Strasco, I think I'm all caught up for Twilight. So is Hero done as well? No, Hero keeps on rocking. Strasco. We are still in Tarak Nev. The GM is looking at fuel. Thank you. The GM is looking at a massive backlog of in-person games that he needs to edit. I might even do some of that this afternoon. So no, more episodes coming for Hero, but no, this is it for Twilight. So I thank you for those very kind words, Graham.
Can I? I do have a question.
Yes.
Just an opportunity for you to share anything that you wanted to tell us about that we've missed, or that your favourite bits, or anything like that. I mean, don't need to, but
yeah, I guess as a storyteller, you just you're happy when your players are happy, right? And moments like, and unfortunately it wasn't, I really regret this bit not being filmed, but there was a particular piece where Nicholas did some particularly devious, messed up stuff of teleporting into somebody else's mind. That was one of I reckon, some of the best role-playing I've ever seen. And it was risky as all hell, and it could have gone terribly, but it worked. And Pete, having you just thrilled to bits that it worked was really cool.
Yeah.
So Jadar's victory, clobbering the demon with her staff, was great. I mean, we play this for fun and to see and challenge you, right? Like, I don't give you a free ride. I don't make it easy, but to have you guys succeed and for you guys to get a thrill out of that is always it's the reason I play this game and why I love this hobby and why I've always loved this hobby. There's bucket loads I could talk to for hours and hours and hours, but no, ultimately I've loved it, and the fact that there's an old adage about basically definition of a good role-playing game if people keep showing up, and you guys have kept showing up, so I must have been doing something right. Actually, terrible phrase. Bad. We must have been doing something right. I've always said that the GM's job is to set the scene. I give you the scenery, I put the spotlight on, I address the set, but it's up to you guys to make the most of actually what's in front of you, and I think you have. So Pete, really no more words than that, other than to say that I've had a lot of fun, a huge amount of fun too. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. I think we're at an end. So, thank you, Strazko. That's cool.
Yeah,
Stara, Pete, Graham, and Chris. A big thank you. Thank you, Strazko. That's really kind. So look, with that, no more grandiose words from me. Our tale is told. This is the end of Twilight of the Old Order. To our viewers, hope you've enjoyed the ride. Have fun. Keep gaming. And as always, may the dice roll in your favor. Roll credits. The end.
Hey! Is this where we put the MGM, that's all, folks?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Oh, we've got to destroy the back channel now so we can never see it.
I'd love to see the back channel.
Oh no.
But no, I will be shutting down both the WhatsApp and the Discord, so grab any goodies you want out of it, guys, or I'll email.
So much in there.
Massive thanks to both Matt and to Strazko for hanging on in there and listening. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.